Chapter 99. Xiao Xian put down the animal skin curtain and said, "Hello, my name is Xian. The shaman asked me to come here to learn." The person who was processing the herbs on the stone plate raised her head and looked at Xiao Xian. She smiled and said, "I'm Guizhe." Although she had a smile on her face, Xiao Xian didn't think she was friendly or malicious. She was just like the shamaness, smiling faintly at everyone. She looked friendly, but that was just a facade. She was really taught by the shaman. Even her smile was the same. Compared to other people who had awakened their totemic power, Guizhe was relatively thin and weak. After all, in the tribe, no matter if it was a boy or a girl, after awakening their totemic power, their physique would be strengthened a lot, and they would look stronger. The temperature in the room was a little higher than outside. Just like what people in the tribe said, this room was connected to the fire pit. Xiao Xian did not know how the heat was transmitted. After all, there were no suspicious objects around the room. Walking to the stone table, Xiao Xian asked, "What do I need to do first?" Putting down the stone plate in his hand, Guizhe thought for a while, and said, "You can watch from the side and see what I'm going to do." Okay. Xiao Xian had no objection. He wanted to observe first. He still did not know how to process the herbs here. The plants here were too strange, but similar to what Xiao Xian learned in his previous life, most of these medicinal plants needed to be selected and processed. Some parts of the same plant could be used to save people, while some could be used to poison others. Up to now, Xiao Xian only knew a few basic ways to use the herbs he saw when he went out with the hunting team. He also learned a little about harvesting when he followed the advance group. For example, when was the best time to harvest, which plants could be harvested from the ground, which needed to be uprooted, and some could only be harvested when flowering. As for now, the first thing he needed to know was how to select the plants after they were delivered here. Guizhe was doing the same thing now, and he had already processed more than half of the plants. After all, it had been 20 days since the last hunting team came back, and the plants that could not be kept for a long time had already been processed, and the plants that could be kept for a long time were processed last. Xiao Xian walked over and stood beside Guizhe, watching her every step carefully. When the turtle saw Xiao Xian approaching, it bit Xiao Xian's leg. Xiao Xian's line of sight had been fixed on Guizhe's actions as he processed the herbs. He did not look at the tortoise, but his hanging hand moved quickly. He drew out his stone knife and slapped the back of the knife at the tortoise's beak that looked like an eagle's hook. "Paw!" The tortoise shook its head after being slapped. It still looked at Xiao Xian with disdain. It probably remembered how Xiao Xian treated it in the past. But then, to Xiao Xian's surprise, the tortoise did not bite him again. It was completely different from when they were in the stone vat at the foot of the mountain, when it could not wait to kill a target as soon as it saw one. Xiao Xian did not understand. Why did the tortoise, which used to love biting people, settle down when it came here? Was it because of the witch? He did not understand. Anyway, the tortoise did not pester and bite people anymore, which saved Xiao Xian a lot of trouble. It was almost winter, and the temperature had dropped a little. If he used the standard of pet tortoises in his previous life, the tortoise's appetite and activity should have been greatly reduced. But now, this weird-looking tortoise with even weirder attributes had completely overturned Xiao Xian's previous understanding of it. The tortoise looked energetic, much livelier than when it was thrown into the water vat by Xiao Xian 10 days ago. Although it did not crawl fast, the tortoise's steps were domineering. Few of the new plants brought back by the hunting team can be eaten directly. Most of them have dirt and other impurities in them. Guizhe explained some basic knowledge to Xiao Xian when he was processing the herbs in the stone plate. Newly brought back plants had a lot of dirt and other impurities in them, and some of them also had a high water content. If they were not processed in time, they would also go through qualitative changes. Maybe they would grow moldy like ordinary plants, or maybe they would go through other changes. Therefore, the plants brought back by the advance group were directly sent here, and the medicine house would immediately process the ones that were most likely to go through qualitative changes. After the initial washing of the plants, we need to remove the dirt and sort them out. Then we need to remove the non-medicinal parts. For example, the outer shell of this fruit must be removed. Its outer shell can make people have diarrhea, Guizhe said. Obviously, this kind of fruit was very poisonous. It could make people in the tribe, who were physically strong, suffer from severe diarrhea and even urinate and defecate. Even warriors could not stand it. Xiao Xian watched Guizhe skillfully cut open the hard outer shell of the fruit with a sharpened stone knife. He peeled off the outer shell of the fruit with long hairs like whiskers, but the translucent and solidified flesh inside was not damaged at all. Obviously, Guizhe was very familiar with this kind of treatment. Xiao Xian wanted to ask what to do with the poisonous outer shell of the fruit, but before he could ask, he saw Guizhe throw the outer shell into the tortoise's open mouth. Xiao Xian was speechless. What the hell? Wasn't it poisonous? One threw it away calmly, while the other could not wait to eat it. Xiao Xian was stunned. Did the shaman send the tortoise here just to be a lab rat? Or a trash can to dispose of waste? Guizhe did not notice Xiao Xian's strange behavior. Because she wanted to demonstrate to Xiao Xian, she did not continue to deal with the same thing. Instead, she walked to another stone plate and picked up a plant that looked like a withered leaf. She continued, not every kind of fruit needs to be removed like the fruit. For example, you need to remove the stalk. The stalk will make people's hands and feet numb. Xiao Xian watched as she skillfully peeled off the stalk, then threw all the peeled leaves into the tortoise's mouth again. Xiao Xian was speechless. Looking at the tortoise chewing with its beak, Xiao Xian thought to himself, severe diarrhea? Hands and feet numb? It's all fed to the tortoise. Moreover, the tortoise was fine after eating it. These are all harmful. Why are you still feeding it? Xiao Xian asked. When he gave the tortoise to the shaman, he thought that the shaman would stew it directly. He did not expect it to be sent here, and it was so obedient. What surprised Xiao Xian the most was that Guizhe actually cut off the parts of the plant that were identified as harmful to people and fed them to the tortoise. The tortoise even ate it, big mouthfuls. The shaman said that you can try to feed it some. Guizhe did not feel that there was anything wrong. Since the shaman said it, it must be correct. She just had to carry it out. Sure enough, it was an undead species. Xiao Xian had a new understanding of the strange species in this place. He followed Guizhe around the stone table. After looking at the preliminary treatment methods for many kinds of plants, Guizhe continued with her task. After looking for a while, Xiao Xian asked, "Is there any relevant information, such as animal skin scrolls? I can take a look first." After all, the advance group had spent a lot of effort to find these plants. They couldn't let a newbie like Xiao Xian operate them. Even if the steps were very simple, they couldn't let him operate them. Unless the shamaness agreed, Guizhe couldn't make this decision. Xiao Xian could not help even if he wanted to. Guizhe thought about it and felt that it was right. She also began to read the drawings and related records on the animal skin scrolls very early. After she understood the basic knowledge, she began to learn from the shaman. However, compared to Xiao Xian, she had someone to explain to her when she read the animal skin scrolls. She was willing to explain to Xiao Xian, but unfortunately, there were still a lot of plants that had not been processed. Guizhe pointed to a small stone table in the corner where there were many animal skin scrolls. She said, "They are all over there. You can read them. Then I will go first. You can continue. I will ask you later if I don't understand." Xiao Xian came to the stone table. Some of the animal skin scrolls on the table looked old, but the one on the side was relatively new. It should have been made this year. Xiao Xian first took a slightly old animal skin scroll and opened it to have a look. There were several drawings of plants, and there was a brief description next to them. However, it was not detailed, and the drawings were not detailed. How to identify them? In the eyes of a layman, looking at these drawings, more than 4 out of 10 would feel that they looked the same. Weren't they all leaves, roots, barks, seeds and so on? They all looked the same. There was only one color, the drawing style was rough, and the annotations were too thin. There was no real object to compare with, and no one to explain. Just by looking at these animal skin scrolls, one could not understand much. After flipping through a few old animal skin scrolls, Xiao Xian found that they were all similar in style. Then he set his eyes on the newer one. The quality of the animal skin scroll looked much better than the other scrolls. After opening the slightly new animal skin scroll and seeing the contents, Xiao Xian was stunned. If the previous scrolls were rough, then the drawings on this one were extremely simple. Just like the symbols drawn by the shaman today, no one could understand what these drawings were. Staring at a drawing that looked like a blob of ink, Xiao Xian wondered if this was a lump of paint that fell from the shaman's brush when he was drawing. Unexpectedly, in the next moment, Xiao Xian seemed to see a round brown fruit gradually emerge from the drawing. Chapter 100. Xiao Xian was startled. He moved his eyes away and looked at the animal skin roll again. It was still the same symbols. However, when he stared at the ink blob for a while, the brown fruit appeared again. It was very clear, as if a real object was placed in front of his eyes. Even the wrinkles on the fruit's skin could not be seen in detail. What was going on? In the past, Xiao Xian would only see those illusionary pictures in front of his eyes when he was in danger or in a special environment. But now, he was not in danger, and he did not encounter any special terrain like the green thief. He was just staying in this medicine house. If the illusionary pictures were because of this special place, why did they only appear now after so long? This animal skin roll was not ordinary. Xiao Xian no longer stared at the ink blob. Instead, he changed the picture and continued to stare at it. Soon, Xiao Xian found that the other pictures were similar to the ink blob. After staring for a while, a picture of a real object would gradually appear on the drawings. It was very clear. Xiao Xian saw a lot of herbs in this animal skin roll. Among them were the wind ball and the green thief that he had found when he went out with the advance group this year. There were also many other strange-looking herbs. What surprised Xiao Xian the most was that the wind ball and the green thief had some traces because of the traps. Xiao Xian had set up the traps himself and caught these two herbs. Naturally, he could recognize them at a glance. The pictures in this animal skin roll were exactly the same as the ones in Xiao Xian's memory. They were the real objects reproduced. Looking at the other pictures, there were not only pictures of plants, but also of animals. On this animal skin scroll, the first half of the scroll was drawn with plant medicinal materials, while the second half was drawn with animal medicinal materials. However, no matter which type it was, there was only a simple symbol, and there was no description of how to obtain these finished products. There were many animal herbs. Xiao Xian could only see the shape of the finished products, but he could not tell which part of which animal these finished products were. The annotations on the side were limited, so it was impossible to understand it in detail. Xiao Xian flipped through the rest of the animal skin scrolls on the stone table. Except for the one in his hand, the rest of the animal skin scrolls were very ordinary. It could be seen that the artist had tried his best to draw the objects as clearly as possible, but his drawing skills were limited. Xiao Xian could not see the images of the objects in these drawings. Compared to the reproduction of the objects, the difference was huge. Xiao Xian recalled the time when he went to the shaman's place and saw the shaman's drawings. At first glance, those drawings looked very simple, but every stroke seemed to be extremely difficult. Now, thinking about the animal skin scroll in his hand, Xiao Xian had a guess in his heart. When Guizhe finished processing the herbs in a stone plate, Xiao Xian took the special animal skin scroll and asked, "Was this scroll written by the shaman himself?" Guizhe looked sideways and saw the animal skin scroll in Xiao Xian's hand. Her originally calm face suddenly became nervous. She quickly walked over and looked carefully. After confirming that the animal skin scroll was not damaged, she breathed a sigh of relief. She originally wanted to take the animal skin scroll from Xiao Xian's hand and put it away to avoid any damage. However, thinking that the shaman had personally agreed to let Xiao Xian come to learn, she hesitated for a moment and withdrew her hand. This is indeed written by the shaman himself. This is the one he wrote this year. You. Be careful when you read it. Don't break it. Guizhe stared at the animal skin scroll in Xiao Xian's hand and said seriously, every time the shaman comes, he will look through it. If he breaks it, he will be angry. Xiao Xian naturally knew how important the shaman was to the people in the tribe. Nodding, Xiao Xian replied, I know. I will be careful. By the way, have you read this too? Xiao Xian raised the animal skin scroll in his hand and asked. Guizhe heard this and smiled. Her eyes were filled with unconcealed reverence. She said, this was written by the shaman himself. Only he can read it. No one else can understand it. She thought that Xiao Xian was the same as her, who couldn't understand what was written on the animal skin roll. She had seen similar animal skin rolls when she first entered the medicine house. However, she heard that this kind of animal skin roll belonged to the shaman volume, which was completely different from ordinary animal skin rolls. Wu roll. Only the shaman can understand it. So, if you can't understand this, you should change to other animal skin scrolls. After saying this, Guizhe went back to the big stone table to process the herbs. There were still several stone plates on the table that needed to be processed. Moreover, the hunting team would be back soon, so the herbs needed to be mixed as soon as possible. She did not have much time to talk to Xiao Xian. After Guizhe left, Xiao Xian looked down at the animal skin scroll in his hand and whispered, Wu roll? Guizhe misunderstood him, but he did not explain. It was even more impossible for him to say to Guizhe, I'm sorry, but I can understand it. Wu roll. Only the shaman can understand it? Who said that? Xiao Xian shook his head and moved a wooden chair over. He spread the animal skin scroll on the small stone table and continued to look at the drawings. He had only roughly glanced at a few of them, and there were many others that he had not seen yet. Even if the annotations were not clear, he could at least remember them. Maybe he would encounter them when he went hunting in the future. Since it was called Wu roll, it must be because of the shaman. The drawings made by the shaman were different from those made by others. The shaman might have used some special ability to draw his consciousness into the drawings. Even though the drawings looked simple, there were many secrets hidden in them. If anyone could understand these drawings, why would Ta and the other hunters have other drawings? The drawings in the hands of the two hunting team leaders were of course drawn separately, so that they could be understood. Xiao Xian left the medicine house in the afternoon. He could not spend the night there. Not long after Xiao Xian left, the shaman came to the medicine house. Hearing Guizhe respectfully report the results of the processing of the herbs in the afternoon, the shaman smiled and said, Very good. Thank you for your hard work. The old man and the young man had the same expression on their faces, but Guizhe's face was filled with joy because of the shaman's compliment. After asking about the herbs, the shaman asked again, How was Xian's performance today? I taught him how to process the herbs, and then he was reading the animal skin scroll. Guizhe briefly told the shaman what had happened today, and pointed to the small stone table. He also looked at your animal skin scroll. I guess he was just like me, confused. The shaman's expression changed slightly, but it was too fast for Guizhe to notice. How long did he look at that animal skin scroll? Asked the shaman. Almost half a day. He even yawned. Guizhe did not say the second part, for he was afraid that the shaman would be angry. The shaman was silent for a while, and then said slowly, Don't mind him. You go about your business. The hunting team will be back soon. Prepare 3 portions of the herbs we need. Yes. The next day, Xiao Xian came to the medicine house again. Guizhe was still busy at the big stone table. Xiao Xian stood aside and watched him for a while. He helped to move things down, and read the preliminary processing methods of some new herbs. After reading all of them, he turned to other places. When he glanced at the small stone table where the animal skin scroll was placed, he paused. He found that there was another animal skin scroll on the table. Judging from the quality of the animal skin scroll, it was very similar to the one from the Wu roll yesterday. Xiao Xian picked up the new animal skin scroll and opened it. What came into his eyes was indeed the same as the one from the Wu roll yesterday. However, this animal skin scroll did not contain a single image, but a series of images. What was recorded on this animal skin scroll was the processing methods for 8 commonly used medicinal plants. From selecting, cutting, steaming, drying, and storing, there were all descriptions. Looking at these pictures, Xiao Xian felt as if he was looking at a pair of experienced hands, demonstrating a series of processes in front of him. After a series of rune images, there were also annotations. The images and the words were very clear and profound. Chapter 101. Not only that day, but every day after that, every time Xiao Xian went up the mountain to the medicine house, he would find a new set of Wu roll on the small stone table in the corner. From the beginning of the collection and processing of the basic plants, to how to lure the animal herbs, how to capture them, how to process them, and how to collect and prepare the rare herbs. All of these were recorded on the animal skin roll in the form of Wu roll. Every time Xiao Xian looked at it, he could see the real scenes. Because the pictures were all continuous, instead of separate ones, when he looked at them together, he could see different scenes. Sometimes Xiao Xian even had a feeling that he was doing it himself. He could feel the touch, the strength, and so on more or less. The Wu roll was very precious. Since the shaman took it out, obviously, he already knew that Xiao Xian could understand it. The shaman. Many things could not be hidden from him. And the extra Wu roll on the stone table made Xiao Xian understand the shaman's attitude. One day, when Xiao Xian was looking at a Wu roll in the corner, someone ran in and said, "Gui Zhe, the hunting team is back. The shaman wants you to go there." There was a room next to the medicine house, which was used to treat the wounded. Every time the hunting team sent the wounded back, they would directly send them there. It was close to the medicine house, so they could just go there and get whatever herbs they needed, saving time. The Guizhe did not waste any time. He put down what he was doing and went there. As for Xiao Xian, he was not allowed to go in. Without permission, no one was allowed to go in case they would interfere with the treatment. Xiao Xian felt a little regretful. He wanted to see how the shaman treated the wounded, but he was stopped, so he could only sit in the medicine house. Guizhe went out for a while and ran back to the medicine house. She took a few packets of medicine that had already been wrapped. Half a minute later, she hurriedly ran back. Bitter sand root, 7 forks, palmer fruit, heart-piercing stem. Guizhe murmured the names of the herbs as she took out some herbs from the stone jars or wooden boxes that contained the finished products. Seeing her in such a hurry, Xiao Xian guessed that the number of wounded warriors sent by the hunting team was more than expected, and the herbs she had prepared were not ready. The herbs she had just taken were not enough, so she had to make some on the spot. There was no need for a scale. Guizhe only needed to casually grab it with his hand, and the dosage of the same medicine was almost the same. This was the conclusion that Xiao Xian had come to after watching from the sidelines for the past few days. This kind of kung fu was not something that could be achieved in a short period of time. Perhaps the shaman had been training Guizhe since a long time ago. Everyone in the tribe thought that the medicine in the bag was made by the shaman himself, but now it seemed that many of them were made by the Guizhe. "Do you need help?" Xiao Xian asked. Guizhe was going to refuse, but after thinking for a while, he nodded. However, he did not let Xiao Xian deal with the herbs directly, but only asked him to pass the things to man. What happened? Not enough medicine? How many people were injured this time? Xiao Xian asked. 9 were injured. Guizhe said. Those who were sent back were naturally heavily injured. 9 heavily injured people were indeed more than the usual number of injured people. However, fortunately, no one died. The heart-piercing stem is not enough. Help me bring the box with the heart-piercing stem. Guizhe said hurriedly. Okay. Xiao Xian had already memorized the locations of the herbs, so he did not need to be reminded by Guizhe. He went to bring a big wooden box. The heart-piercing stem was a kind of herb that grew on the green land. It was only as thick as a little finger, with a thin layer of skin on the outside. There was a thin black thread-like core in the center of the stem. The skin could not be used as medicine, and the black core in the middle was poisonous. Therefore, when dealing with the heart-piercing stem, in addition to peeling off the skin, the black core in the middle also had to be removed. Although he was in a hurry, Guizhe's movements were still orderly. However, he was still too slow. The heart-piercing stem was not easy to deal with, and it was very time-consuming. Xiao Xian had seen her deal with it, and each stem took at least half an hour. Because of this, Guizhe was so anxious that his face was sweating. He held the knife steadily and faster, but it was not as perfect as usual. After all, he was going to save people now. He would rather spend more medicine to deal with the heart-piercing stem as soon as possible and bring it to the shaman. The heart-piercing stem was generally used to treat internal injuries that were beyond the warrior's self-healing range. Such injuries were extremely dangerous, so they had to be treated immediately after they were sent back. The medicine had to be prepared immediately. Every minute delay would increase the danger. Seeing that there were still several heart-piercing stem in the wooden box, Xiao Xian reached out and took one. He gently pinched the stem of the heart-piercing stem from the bottom to the top, along the spiral. Don't mess. Guizhe noticed Xiao Xian's movements and was about to tell Xiao Xian not to mess with the herbs. After all, he was a greenhorn. However, when he turned his head and saw the scene in front of him, he held back his words. After Xiao Xian quickly finished pinching, he held the heart-piercing stem that was half an arm long in one hand and a small stone knife in the other. Xiao Xian specially polished the knife with a piece of high-quality stone, and the stone was sent to him by the shaman in the first half of the year because of Xiao Xian's meritorious service. It was not big, after all, high-quality stone was extremely difficult to find. After polishing some small stone tools, Xiao Xian kept the rest of the stone. When he saw the small stone knife Guizhe used to peel the bark on the first day, he went back and polished one himself. High-quality stone was not easy to polish, so it took him a few days to finish. He just brought it with him today and didn't expect to use it. The knife flashed several times. After several times, Xiao Xian withdrew the knife and pulled the heart-piercing stem from the top to the other side like peeling a banana. It was very smooth. It was completely different from when Guizhe peeled the heart-piercing stem. Guizhe even forgot what he was doing. He opened his eyes wide and stared at Xiao Xian's movements. When the skin was pulled close to the end, according to Guizhe's usual practice, he should use the stone knife to directly cut off the skin and part of the end. As for the inner core, he usually cut it vertically from the middle and carefully dug it out bit by bit. However, Xiao Xian didn't do that. Instead, when he got close to the end, he pinched the end and twisted it gently. Then, he pulled out a thin black inner core along with the end. Guizhe, the expression on his face was already frozen. It wasn't that she hadn't tried before. It was because she had tried that she knew how difficult it was to pull out the inner core like this. However, in front of her, a newbie who didn't know anything did it so easily, as if he had practiced it thousands of times. The whole set of movements was smooth and without any pause. In fact, Xiao Xian wasn't too sure why he could do it so perfectly for the first time. It was like a kind of instinct. It wasn't Xiao Xian's own instinct, but after watching the Wu roll, it was like a kind of instinctive consciousness. When he was operating, it seemed that someone was telling him how to do it, how to use force, and how to pull. The whole set of movements almost completely copied the scene of the string of runes about the heart-piercing stem that appeared on the animal skin roll. Because of Xiao Xian's participation, the medicine was quickly prepared. Guizhe took the medicine and ran over, leaving Xiao Xian and the turtle in the medicine house. About 2 hours later, the shaman came over, looking tired. Guizhe stayed there to take care of the wounded, and didn't go back to the medicine house with the shaman. When the shaman came in, Xiao Xian was feeding the turtle with the medicine waste. "How's it going over there?" Xiao Xian asked and handed a glass of water to him. The shaman sat on the wooden chair and took 2 sips of water. He calmed down and said, "It's fine. That means that there is no danger." Xiao Xian continued to feed the turtle with the waste. The shaman stared at Xiao Xian. Guizhe had already said that Xiao Xian dealt with the heart-piercing stem. He was not too surprised. He glanced at the stone table in the corner and the animal skin roll on the table. He opened his mouth and said, "Xian. What? Do you want to be a shaman?" "I don't want to." Chapter 102. If it were other people in the tribe, they would be thrilled to hear the shaman's words, but the one sitting here was Xiao Xian. The shaman had expected that Xiao Xian would refuse, but he didn't expect it to be so straightforward. The shaman had been looking for a successor for a long time. As the spiritual leader of the tribe, the shaman had to choose the right successor. Therefore, the recent generations of the shaman had spent a lot of effort on the selection of successors. When Gigu was still young, he was chosen by the shaman. The shaman planned to train him from a young age, so he was named Gigu. The name Gigu came from the blessing incantation, "Water returns to its gully." It was obvious that the shaman had high expectations for Gigu. Unfortunately, the shaman was studying some newly found herbs at that time, so he forgot to keep an eye on Gigu. When he came back to his senses, he found that Gigu was already on his way to becoming a warrior, pursuing the peak of power, and never looking back. Gigu respected the shaman as much as the others in the tribe. If anyone said something bad about the shaman, he would fight back. But, since he was young, his biggest goal was to become a powerful warrior. The shaman didn't get angry with Gigu, but he began to reflect. The main idea of the tribe was to become a powerful warrior, and they were very persistent in the pursuit of power. Those who were forced couldn't become a qualified shaman. The successor had to be willing to do so. After Gigu, the shaman began to pay attention to other people in the tribe. Because everyone wanted to become a warrior, the shaman wanted to choose from those who couldn't awaken. If they couldn't awaken, would they be willing to be a shaman wholeheartedly? It didn't matter whether they could awaken their totemic power or not, as long as they met the requirements, they would be able to inherit the power from the shaman. As for the original power, it didn't have much effect after becoming a shaman, because the shaman couldn't go out of the tribe. Nothing could happen to the shaman. No one could guarantee that nothing would happen to him after he left the tribe. Therefore, generally speaking, the shaman of the tribe would not leave the tribe after he took over the responsibilities of the previous shaman. No one in the tribe would let the shaman get involved in danger. If the leader was gone, they could choose another powerful one, but not the shaman. Every shaman would be chosen very early on, and once they were chosen, they would teach them by example. This was a tradition. As for the requirements for the candidates, no one could say for sure. It was completely up to the shaman to decide. Among the generations of shamans, there were men, women, warriors, and people who had never awakened their totemic powers. Therefore, whether or not one could awaken their totemic powers was not the deciding factor. However, after more than 20 years after Gigu, the shaman still couldn't find a suitable candidate. Occasionally, he would go down the mountain to see the other children in the Mountain Foot district, but every time, he would return disappointed. Until one day, Gigu came with his newborn daughter, and asked the shaman to give her a name. The moment the shaman saw the baby in Gigu's arms, he had another idea. He named the baby Guizhe, which was also derived from the blessing spell. The soil belongs to the house, the water belongs to the ravine, the insects don't work, the grass belongs to the pond. Therefore, from a very young age, Guizhe was trained as the next shaman. At that time, only a few people living on the mountain top knew about it. However, the shaman didn't expect to see Xiao Xian again. Since Xiao Xian awakened, he acted differently from the others. Since then, the shaman really began to pay attention to him. Moreover, after that, many things changed his view of Xiao Xian again and again. If the reason why Xiao Xian improved faster than the others was because of his talent, then what about Xiao Xian's ability to see things that others couldn't, and his ability to recover faster than intermediate totemic warriors? Now, he could even see Wu Roll. Why did he have such power? In fact, the shaman didn't know, but he believed that it was because of the fire seed. The fire seed in the tribe was incomplete, but since Xiao Xian awakened, it was more like the awakening of a complete fire seed. But at the same time, he had some abilities similar to the shaman's, which allowed him to see things that other warriors couldn't. When the shaman took over, he would pass on his abilities to the next shaman. However, Xiao Xian didn't get the inheritance, but he already had similar abilities. Could it be that he was the descendant of the previous shaman? It didn't make sense. When the shaman retired, he would pass on his abilities to the next shaman. The shaman wouldn't be so selfish, and his loyalty was unquestionable. Moreover, after flipping through several population registration scrolls, the shaman confirmed that Xian's ancestors were indeed ordinary warriors in the tribe. Until now, the shaman hadn't found the exact answer, but he didn't care about it. He planned to persuade Xiao Xian to take over the position of shaman, but he didn't expect to be rejected so directly. You really don't want to? The shaman asked again, which was rare. Xiao Xian looked at the shaman, but didn't say anything. He was different from the natives. His thoughts, ideas, principles, and so on were all very different. How could he take over the position? But he couldn't say these. Fine. The shaman sighed, and didn't continue with this topic. Instead, he asked, have you read those animal skin scrolls? Yes. Do you understand? Yes. Xian, do you want to see more Wu Roll? The shaman asked. Yes. Xiao Xian was very curious about many things recorded in the Wu Roll. At the same time, he guessed that some of the more ancient Wu Roll might contain more secrets of the tribe. If he wanted to know more about the tribe, he could only start from the shaman. And the Wu Roll was an excellent history book. I can show you more Wu Roll. The shaman said slowly. Xiao Xian didn't say anything, but waited for the shaman's next words. The shaman raised his head, glanced at the stone table with the herbs, and continued, I hope you can help Guizhe. Of course. Even if the shaman didn't say it, Xiao Xian would teach Guizhe what he knew. Helping others was also helping himself. The bags of herbs that were given before the hunt were all prepared by Guizhe. Xiao Xian was naturally happy to help Guizhe increase his efficiency. The shaman nodded with satisfaction. After all, he was old and had a lot of things to do. He wanted to teach Guizhe, but he didn't have the ability. It was impossible for him to teach Guizhe everything. It was also impossible for him to teach her every method of handling medicinal herbs. Guizhe's knowledge of medicinal herbs was, in fact, learned from others. For example, if he had time to teach Guizhe the heart-piercing stem, perhaps Guizhe would master it faster. But the shaman always thought that maybe when Guizhe took over the shaman's responsibility, he would inherit the shaman's knowledge and understand the Wu Roll. What he spent more time teaching Guizhe was temperament, attitude, worldview, and some things related to the overall situation of the tribe. These were the most important things. And now Xiao Xian's performance could solve this problem very well. Although it was inevitable that he felt a little regretful, the shaman was still satisfied. After chatting with Xiao Xian about the herbs on the Wu Roll, the shaman got up and was about to leave. Before leaving, the shaman said to Xiao Xian, from tomorrow onwards, come to my place in the morning. Some Wu Roll can't be brought here. Come to the medicine house in the afternoon. Okay. Xiao Xian replied and bowed to the shaman seriously. Guizhe didn't go back to the medicine house. Xiao Xian had nothing to do, so he processed all the unprocessed herbs on the stone table. It was only the preliminary processing, so it wasn't difficult. The processing steps of these herbs were all recorded on the Wu roll. These days, he also saw how Guizhe processed them, so he knew some of the problems that needed to be paid attention to. Like the heart-piercing stem, Guizhe processed them skillfully. When he left the medicine house and went down the mountain, Xiao Xian looked up at the sky. Cha-Cha was hovering in the sky above his head. The world is so big. Do you want to go out and see it with your own eyes? Xiao Xian whispered. Soil in its own house, water in its own gully, insects don't work, grass and trees in its own pond. This sentence came from the ancient ballad, Wax, which was borrowed here. Chapter 103. The next day, Xiao Xian came to the shaman's stone house early in the morning. The shaman gave him an animal skin roll that described the methods of collecting and processing 10 kinds of rare animal herbs. Xiao Xian thought that the shaman would only let him read the Wu roll for herbs, but he didn't expect the shaman to ask, "Have you read it?" "Yes, if I can meet those animals, I am confident that I can get all the herbs." Xiao Xian answered. "Yes." The shaman didn't comment, and then said to the guard at the door, "If it's not urgent, don't come in." Seeing the shaman's attitude, Xiao Xian also became serious. It seemed that the shaman had something important to say. "Sit here." The shaman pointed to a short table next to him, and then took out an unwritten animal skin roll and a stone plate that contained the shaman's special paint. This array, Xiao Xian roughly understood what he meant. "Do you know how the Wu roll is drawn?" the shaman asked. "No." Xiao Xian was a little confused. Wasn't the Wu roll made by the shaman alone? Seeing the confusion in Xiao Xian's eyes, the shaman said slowly, "The power of the totem is not only one kind of power. Body and spirit, becoming a warrior is the strengthening of the body. The other kind exists in everyone's body, but it's not much." "What's the other kind?" Xiao Xian asked. "The power of inheritance, the inheritance of spiritual consciousness," the shaman said. Every shaman would inherit a large amount of power from the previous shaman. Since you can understand the Wu roll, I believe that you are different from others. You should have more power of inheritance than others, the shaman said. "The power of inheritance. How do you understand it?" Xiao Xian asked. The shaman looked at Xiao Xian, raised his pine bark-like finger, and pointed at Xiao Xian's forehead. "Ask the totem, and you will get the answer." Xiao Xian closed his eyes and felt the totem in his mind. The 2 horns were surrounded by dancing flames, and nothing else could be seen. Just as Xiao Xian was puzzled, the shaman's voice rang in his ears. "Look carefully." Xiao Xian continued to observe the totem, down to the details. Suddenly, Xiao Xian felt something and looked at the bottom of the flames, at the faint blue flames. There was more than one layer of flames. Xiao Xian opened his eyes and asked tentatively, "Blue?" The shaman nodded his head in satisfaction. As for where Xiao Xian's power of inheritance came from, the shaman didn't know and didn't want to find out. "How many?" the shaman asked. Xiao Xian looked at the brush beside him, then looked at the shaman and asked, "May I?" The shaman handed over a thin brush. In Xiao Xian's eyes, the brush wasn't exquisite, and it wasn't easy to use. It wasn't as good as a carbonized tree branch. However, it wasn't the right time to find a carbonized tree branch, so he could use this brush to draw a rough picture. Xiao Xian drew a rough picture of the totem on the empty animal skin roll in front of him. The shaman looked at Xiao Xian's drawing, and his smile deepened. Not bad, his drawing skills were good, much better than many people in the tribe. However, Wu roll's drawing wasn't just a good drawing. Whether the lines were good or not, it didn't have much to do with Wu roll. "Here." Xiao Xian drew a line on the flames around the horns. "This should be the power of inheritance, right?" "Very good, this is indeed the power of inheritance," the shaman said with satisfaction. The shaman was about to say something else, but Xiao Xian continued, "And here, Here too, here too. Wait, let me take a closer look. The shaman's words were stuck in his throat. Every time Xiao Xian drew a line, the shaman's face couldn't help but twitch. As Xiao Xian drew more and more, the shaman's expression became more and more strange. His eyes were filled with both joy and sadness, and other complicated emotions. If it were someone else, they would have suspected that they were fooled, but the shaman knew that Xiao Xian was telling the truth. With so much power of inheritance, with such talent, he actually wanted to become a warrior. The shaman couldn't wait to kowtow in front of the fire pit where his ancestors were cremated. Ancestors, tell me, why didn't such a person become a shaman? If it were some hot-tempered shaman in the past, he probably would have chased after Xiao Xian with his walking stick and beaten him up. Xiao Xian compared the blue flames on the totem flames in his mind with the ones drawn on the animal skin scroll, then looked up at the shaman and said, that's all. That's all? The shaman gripped his walking stick tightly, feeling all kinds of emotions. In the end, he could only sigh helplessly. Xiao Xian really didn't think it was a lot. Because, among the flames around the horns, the blue flames did indeed occupy a very small proportion. Xiao Xian only heard the shaman say that most people didn't have much power of inheritance, but he didn't know what kind of not much the shaman meant, so he drew all of this. If he knew the shaman's standard, he would definitely hold back. The shaman stared at the totem drawing of the power of inheritance on the animal skin scroll and didn't say anything. Just as Xiao Xian was wondering what was wrong with the shaman said in a slightly heavy tone, "Very good, this way it will be easier for you to draw." Xiao Xian listened attentively to the shaman's explanation of the Wu roll drawing method. The Wu roll drawing is actually the combination of the power of inheritance, the consciousness, and the drawing. The three of them have reached a state of integration. When the viewer was able to use the power of inheritance and become one with the painting that carried the consciousness, they would be able to interact with the consciousness of the painter. If they could control it accurately, the viewer would even be able to feel the emotions and other feelings of the painter. The extent of this interaction is related to the painter's foundation and the viewer's ability. The more profound the painter's foundation, the stronger the viewer's ability, and the clearer the interaction. The shaman explained the theory to Xiao Xian. If he wanted to draw the Wu roll, he had to understand all of this. When the shaman was almost done, Xiao Xian also took note of the shaman's words and understood most of it. Only then did he pick up the brush again and start his first Wu roll drawing. For those who were drawing the Wu roll for the first time, they would first practice by copying the Wu roll. This was because when copying the drawings on the Wu roll, there would be a guiding force that would make it easier for the person copying. Xiao Xian carefully looked at one of the drawings on the Wu roll, then put all of his attention on the animal skin scroll on the table in front of him. The moment before the tip of the brush touched the animal skin scroll, Xiao Xian had already activated the power of inheritance in his body and started to draw according to the shaman's instructions. At this moment, Xiao Xian poured all of his power of inheritance and all of his energy into the only point that the tip of the brush touched. He immersed himself in this only goal, and started to slowly move the brush along the guidance of the original Wu roll. After finishing one stroke, Xiao Xian was already sweating profusely. He had used up almost all of his energy and felt like he was about to collapse. He was breathing heavily. Looking at the animal skin scroll again, it was only a small circle. Lifting his sleeve to wipe his sweat, Xiao Xian couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Drawing the Wu roll is so difficult. It's only one stroke, and it even looks like a simple circle, but it's so difficult to start from the beginning. It's full of difficulties. Sure enough, is it because the power of inheritance is not enough? Xiao Xian thought to himself. If the shaman knew what Xiao Xian was thinking at this moment, he probably wouldn't be able to stop himself from hitting him with his walking stick. When he first started copying, it was just a small d, and he had to pause 3 times in the middle. Xiao Xian was able to complete it on his first try. Even in the past, not many shamans could do it. Chapter 104. In the past, Xiao Xian would never believe that he had only drawn one circle in the morning, and he was so tired that he was about to collapse. But now, he personally felt that drawing a circle could be so tiring, and it was even mentally exhausting. When he walked out of the stone house and looked at the surrounding scenery, Xiao felt that the house in his field of vision seemed to be spinning. He looked up at the sky for a while and felt better. He was no longer dizzy and could stand steadily. Xiao carried the stone box that the shaman gave him and went to the medicine house to help Guizhe process the herbs. He didn't know what the shaman said to Guizhe, but when Xiao taught her, she didn't ask too much. She just learned seriously and improved some of the ways to process herbs. Compared to drawing with Wu roll, processing herbs was much easier. When he went down the mountain, Xiao had recovered from his tiredness. In the stone box that the shaman gave him, there were 2 animal skin scrolls, the shaman's special paint, and a writing brush. The shaman didn't have time to teach Xiao every day. Most of the time, Xiao had to practice by himself. The stone box was covered with a grass net, so when Xiao carried it back, it was still shaking. "What is this?" Old Ku asked when he saw Xiao come back with a stone box. "It's a task assigned by the shaman." Although the shaman provided materials for Xiao to practice, he didn't want him to waste them. When he practiced, he had to show them to the shaman. This was also a task assigned by the shaman. When Old Ku heard Xiao words, he suddenly felt a sense of awe. He even looked at the stone box with great respect. He didn't dare to look at it. Since Xiao wanted to draw, he didn't ask any more questions. In his opinion, whatever the shaman did was right and meaningful. "Don't let the shaman down," Old Ku said solemnly. Back in his room, Xiao took out the animal skin scroll. There were 2 animal skin scrolls in the stone box. One of them had not been scribbled at all, while the other was the one he had practiced this morning. There was even a circle on it. Opening the animal skin roll, Xiao took out the paints and brushes. After thinking for a while, he took out the charcoal pencil he had made, intending to try it out. However, just as Xiao was about to activate his power of inheritance, he quickly flicked his wrist and moved the charcoal pencil away. The charcoal pencil broke into many small pieces and scattered on the stone table. If Xiao hadn't moved away quickly, these scattered pieces would have fallen directly into the animal skin roll. Sure enough, not every pen used to draw Wu roll was suitable. The brush that the shaman gave Xiao was made of ferocious beast hair and special wood. Giving up on using other brushes, Xiao picked up the one the shaman gave him and continued to draw. Since it was practice, he naturally started with the drawing he had done this morning. With his first attempt, he became more proficient in drawing the second time. He still didn't draw quickly. When Xiao finished drawing the circle, he realized that it was already dark. At least an hour had passed. Compared to the morning, the drawing time was not much shorter. However, this time, Xiao was not as tired as he was in the morning. The dizziness was also not as strong. This was an improvement. For the next few days, Xiao would bring the stone box to the shaman's place in the morning. However, the shaman was busy these days. After Xiao went over, he would sit in a small room in the stone house and practice. If he had any questions, he would ask the shaman when he was free. The shaman didn't even have time to see the results of Xiao practice. 5 days later, winter officially arrived. The temperature plummeted overnight. When Xiao opened the door in the morning, all he saw was white. In the big bird's nest on the roof, Cha-Cha was stretching its neck to look down. When it saw Xiao come out, it flapped its wings, shook off the snow on its body, and flew up. Cha-Cha slept outside, not because Xiao forced it to. When winter was coming, Cha-Cha had no intention of hiding in the house. Now that it was snowing heavily, it didn't hide either. Since it could withstand this kind of weather, Xiao didn't care. After all, Cha-Cha was not a pet bird in a greenhouse. If it flew to the forest one day, it would also have to endure this kind of weather. It couldn't be pampered. Caesar and Cha-Cha followed Xiao up the mountain. When they were about to reach the top, Caesar went down the mountain by himself, while Cha-Cha flew to other places to look for food. Just by looking at this point, these two were well trained. When Xiao Xian arrived at the stone house, Ta and Gigu, the two team leaders of the hunting group, were already there. Xiao Xian didn't want to disturb them, so he bowed to them and went inside with the stone box. He went to the small room to continue practicing the Wu roll painting. The two team leaders only knew that the shaman was teaching Xiao Xian something about herbs. They felt that Xiao Xian was really a lucky kid. For people in the tribe, it was a great honor to be able to learn from the shaman. They would never have guessed what Xiao Xian was really learning. Xiao Xian opened the animal skin roll, but didn't start painting immediately. When he came in, he heard the two team leaders apologizing. In the past year, some of the herbs they found were not what they needed. It was just that many herbs and plants looked similar, so it was not easy to identify them. Even though they had drawn pictures on the animal skin roll, there were still mistakes in what the advance group brought back every time. For example, some of the herbs and plants Gigu brought back from the last hunting trip had to be removed. This was a communication gap. The shaman couldn't tell the warriors in detail what he said. It was just words, without a real picture, and without a practical operation, so the communication was greatly reduced. It wasn't their fault. After all, not everyone could understand the Wu roll like Xiao Xian. It would be great if everyone could understand the shaman volumes one day. Thinking of this, Xiao Xian raised his eyes and looked at the stone table in front of him. There was an unfinished Wu roll on the table. Xiao Xian took it and looked at it. The content surprised him. It was about farming, but unfortunately, Xiao Xian couldn't see the picture clearly through these pictures. This was a copy of the ancient scroll. No one knew how many times it had been copied, and the original consciousness of the first painter had been blurred. When copying an ancient scroll, because it wasn't seen with one's own eyes, it was equivalent to reading someone else's description, and then retelling it. The retelling would inevitably add some subjective consciousness. It was like a sentence, passed from one person to another. The meaning wouldn't change much, but after being passed by many people, what would it become in the end? 99% of the time, the original words would be changed. Although some things could be seen from the transcribed version of the ancient scroll, it was not as clear as the original version, but there was an increased sense of fuzziness. Just like the one in front of him, the shaman didn't personally experience farming, so naturally, he couldn't understand the wishes of the original painter. The one that was left behind should be a copy of a previous shaman's copy. Since the shaman left it here, it meant that he didn't mean to hide it from Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian looked at the animal skin scroll for a while. Although it wasn't clear, he could still be sure that the picture drawn was not of any place in the tribe. The Wu roll was more like a plain area, with vast farmland and fertile soil. He couldn't see what was being planted, but he could see some vague figures working in the fields. Unfortunately, the area where the tribe was now was not suitable for farming, and the people in the tribe didn't have the intention to do so. There were some edible plants in the mountains around the training ground, which was enough for the people in the tribe. The shaman didn't know how long he would have to wait to see the scene drawn in the animal skin scroll. He left this copy probably because he wanted Xiao Xian to look forward to it. For every person in the tribe, that scene was indeed shocking. Unfortunately, even the shaman didn't expect Xiao Xian to be so special. Putting the animal skin scroll aside, Xiao Xian continued his practice. Now he wasn't copying the Wu roll, but drawing by himself. What he wanted to draw now was a plant he saw in the green field. After mulling over it for a while, he put down his brush and painstakingly finished the drawing. Looking at the animal skin roll, it was really difficult to connect the runes drawn on the animal skin roll with the plant in the green space. The lines were twisted like earthworms. However, aesthetics were secondary. The most important thing was whether or not he could draw the picture in his sea of consciousness. For Xiao Xian, he had already succeeded. In his previous life, Xiao Xian's archaeology classmate once said, "Prehistoric art is the existence of prehistoric ideology, not aesthetic or aesthetic ideology." At that time, Xiao Xian didn't understand, but now, he seemed to understand a lot. The creator of the Wu role was just drawing in the real world. With the help of the power of inheritance, he drew his consciousness in the form of drawing. That was all, it had nothing to do with beauty or ugliness. Thinking of this, Xiao Xian felt a lot better. Looking at the picture he just drew, Xiao Xian thought, if I showed this to the archaeologists in my previous life, they wouldn't know what I drew. Chapter 105. In the afternoon, when Xiao Xian left the medicine house, it was still early in the morning. There were not many herbs to be processed, and there was not much work to be done recently, so Xiao Xian planned to go down the mountain early, and practice his Wu roll drawing when he got back. However, after walking for a short while, Xiao Xian stopped and listened carefully. He lifted his foot and turned towards the direction of the sound. Between the mountainside and the top of the mountain, there was a special place. It was a training ground specially opened by the warriors. However, this training ground was not for the warriors, but for the children on the mountainside and the top of the mountain who had not awakened their totem power. The children on the mountain began to receive training very early, and this was their main training ground. However, the space was limited, and sometimes they had to clear the place for throwing. If there were too many people, they would be easily hurt by the wooden or stone tools thrown out. The children here were all children who had not awakened their totem power, and their abilities were limited. Most of the people who could train here were from the noble families on the mountain. Their elders held important positions in the tribe, and were at least the leaders of the hunting teams. Otherwise, they would not be able to find a place to move around, and would be excluded. Everywhere, there was a competition of fathers. Xiao Xian had never been there for training before. Later, when he awakened his totem power, he passed by the training ground once when he went down the mountain, and just watched from a short distance. It was winter, and snow was falling heavily. In such weather, there were many noises coming from the training ground, and it sounded like there were quite a lot of people there. As he walked towards the training ground, the noises became clearer and clearer. Compared to the foot of the mountain, the main roads were cleared every day in winter, no matter how heavy the snow was. Some of the children who had not awakened their totem power would come out wrapped in thick animal skins. Most of them did not lack food, and the animal skins they wore were of good quality. Even if it was cold, it would not be life-threatening. Following the cleared path, Xiao Xian came to the kid training ground. There were nearly 100 people in the training ground, from 5 or 6 years old to new warriors who had awakened their totem power for 1 or 2 years. Because they could not withstand the cold like totem warriors, the children in the training ground, who had not awakened their totem power, were all wrapped up like rice dumplings. At this moment, there were 3 children in the middle of the crowd. Xiao Xian recognized 2 of them. That was Yang Guang from Qiaomai's family. Yang Guang was the name of these 2 people. Qiao and Mai were twins. Yang was a boy and was born earlier than his sister, Guang. There were very few twins in the tribe. At present, Yang Guang was the only twin in the tribe. It was said that when Yang Guang was born, the shaman went to see him in person. Yang Guang was 1 year younger than Xiao Xian, and he hadn't awakened his totem power yet. However, both of them had good potential. After the end of this winter, Mai planned to let them join the preliminary team and send them to the shaman. Many people in the tribe knew that Guang from Qiaomai's family was born with great strength. She would definitely awaken her totem power in the future, but she was not easy to get along with. Compared to Guang, as the elder brother, Yang was not so outstanding. However, he had a good temper and did not quarrel with others. Every time when Guang fought with others, he would go up and stop them. The 2 siblings had very different personalities. Of course, this was only the version that was heard. As a person who had a good relationship with Qiaomai's family, Xiao Xian naturally knew that the real situation was very different from the rumors in the tribe. As the younger sister, Guang was born with great strength. She could fight against 2 people at once before awakening her totem power. This was a fact. However, it was not true that she was impulsive, irritable, and liked to fight. The tribe treated girls differently from boys. If a boy was punched by a girl, people would say, "Ah, being punched by a girl won't make you lose a piece of meat." But what if it was the other way around? What a bastard! How dare he? Needless to say, the boy's parents would teach him a lesson in person. It was not that there was any gentlemanly behavior here. That was all bullshit. Here, it was because the successive shamans attached great importance to the protection of girls. After all, it was related to the tribe's reproduction and future. The ratio of men to women in the tribe was not equal. Every year, there were fewer girls than boys. For this reason, the successive shamans were worried to death. If there were other tribes nearby, they could just kidnap a girl from outside to be their wife. However, the tribe was almost isolated now. Excluding those who were close to them by blood, there were even fewer people who could be found. Now there were many old bachelors in the tribe. If old Ku had not been injured in the past, he might have already had grandchildren. This was also why every time they walked on the path of glory, the returning young warriors were like peacocks spreading their tails, showing off themselves and their prey. It was precisely because of this difference in treatment in the tribe that every time there was a problem that needed to be solved by force, or if there was someone who was extremely unpleasant to the eye, the one who would charge forward was Guang. As the elder brother, Yang would pull his sister from behind and shout, "Stop fighting, sorry, Guang is too impulsive," and so on. For example, Guang and Guang were having a dispute with another party. Guang was using both her hands and legs to fight the people in front of her, but her brother Yang was holding her back, so she couldn't kick him several times. However, she also succeeded a few times. Otherwise, how did the footprints on the other side come about? Yang pulled his sister and seemed to be dissuading her. However, when someone from the other side stood up to speak, Guang kicked him. She did not kick him, but she scraped his animal skin clothes. The person who just stood up retreated. Yang really couldn't hold her back. Who was he kidding? These two people's strength was actually about the same. If they really wanted to dissuade her, it was impossible that they couldn't hold her back. Yang Guang was not old, and did not have the honest character of Chiao Mai and his wife. Instead, he was mischievous. The day before, he learned some simple rope traps from Xiao Xian, and the next day, he could go out and trap people. Seeing that there were people on the other side who had awakened their totemic power and were about to stand up, Xiao Xian spoke first, "Guang Guang." The people on the other side all looked over. After seeing Xiao Xian, Guang's originally angry face suddenly turned into a smile. She broke free from her brother's pull and ran towards Xiao Xian. Because she was wearing too much, and even covered with a cloak, she looked like a moving dumpling when she ran over. When Guang saw Xiao Xian, it was as if she had found a backer. She pulled Xiao Xian's arm and said, "Brother Xian, they hit me." The few people who had been kicked by Guang wanted to spit out blood. Bullshit. Bullshit. Anyone with eyes could see who was the victim. When the people on the scene saw Xiao Xian, they all had different expressions. The younger ones were not sensible, and did not care much about Xiao Xian. But the older ones were different, especially those who had awakened their totemic power in the same batch as Xiao Xian. Not to mention that Xiao Xian had made great contributions in the past year, and had joined the advance group. Even now, Xiao Xian was still learning things from the shaman. In their eyes, this was a shining halo. Therefore, even if Xiao Xian could not come over and compete with his father, and was born in the cave, no one dared to ask him to leave. Ku, who was standing behind the crowd, felt even more complicated. He was also from the cave, and at this time last year, he was the most envied person in the cave. But now, when they talked about Xiao Xian, how did it feel? In just 1 year, he had changed so much. Chapter 106. After listening to Yang Guang's explanation, Xiao Xian understood the cause and effect of this quarrel. Although in the eyes of many people at the foot of the mountain, a small leader of a hunting group was already very powerful, Mai's family was not really that powerful here. As far as Xiao Xian knew, there were a lot of kids who had a say in the tribe. Their parents were at least at the level of a small group leader. Not only that, but their grandfather's generation and above had all held important positions in the tribe, such as the chief and hunting team leaders. Some of them even had a few shamans in their ancestors. The accumulated advantages were very obvious, and their status in the tribe was also higher than others. In contrast, Mai's family was at most a new noble family with no background here. Yang Guang and Xiao Xian rarely came to this training ground since they were born. Usually, they would be taken to the warrior training ground by Chiao Mai and his wife. Many children on the mountain had the same experience. They were protected by someone, so they would not get hurt in the training ground of totem warriors. In winter, Yang Guang did not want to go out in the winter, because he was still young and did not want to go out. Therefore, he did not come to this training ground with others. Yang Guang and Xiao Xian only knew the children of other warriors in Mai's hunting group. They were not familiar with many people on the mountain. However, this winter, Yang Guang and Xiao Xian decided to do some good training, so that they could awaken their totem power by the end of this winter. However, they did not know the situation in the training ground, and the rules here. Since it was a training ground specially for children who had not awakened their totem power, the adults would not interfere. Whether it was the management or the rules here, they were all set by the children who had not awakened their totem power. Even the ancestors were once children, and many of the rules they set were still in use today. And the rule here was, if you want to come here to train? Sure, but you have to hang your name first. The so-called hanging name was to hang the stone card with your name on the tall stone tree next to the training ground. Only after hanging it up, you were qualified to enter the training ground. When Xiao Xian first saw the stone tree beside the training ground, he thought it was a telephone pole. However, when he got closer and touched it with his hand, he realized that it wasn't. It really was a tree. This stone tree had a very long history, perhaps a few hundred years. It was said that it had been here since the training ground was built, but it grew very slowly. It was hard to tell how much it had grown even after more than 10 years. Their ancestors had left this tree behind, and it later became the deciding factor for these children to enter the training grounds. The stone tree was as thick as 2 people and was nearly 50 meters tall. It was thin and long, and only the top part of it had branches. Most of the bottom part was bare. In other seasons, newcomers would climb up the tree and hang their stone card with their name on a branch. Until one day, when they awakened their totemic power and became warriors, they would take down their cards and officially leave the training ground. This was equivalent to a ritual that had been going on for hundreds of years. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem for Yang Guang. Although the stone tree looked like a stone, the surface of the trunk was as rough as bark. It wasn't too difficult for them to climb it. Originally, under special circumstances, they could make an exception. For example, in this kind of weather, it was impossible to climb. However, today's situation was a bit coincidental. Today, 2 groups of people were going to compete. The winner would be able to train in the training ground for the next 20 days, and the loser would have to leave immediately. This kind of competition actually happened every winter, because at this time, many people on the mountain were preparing for the awakening. In order to be in the best condition for the preliminaries before the end of winter, they would try their best to get training time in the training ground. This was the only place on the mountain that was relatively spacious and suitable for throwing and other training. There was a large open space at the foot of the mountain, but unfortunately, they didn't want to go down the mountain. Moreover, this training ground had become a symbol of status. Being able to come here, even if it was just for show, would make them very happy. For example, Ku was brought here last year, but he didn't have a card, so he couldn't enter. He could only watch from the side. Because of this, Ku often bragged to the people at the foot of the mountain. Originally, the training schedule was that everyone would take turns. The first 10 days, one person would use the training ground, and the next 10 days, they would take turns. But at this point, it was a battle of whose fist was harder. For tribesmen, the way to solve problems was naturally to compete. In the tribe, many people thought that it was necessary for children to compete with each other, and they also agreed with this method. No matter which side would use the training ground at this time, everyone's thought was, anyway, we want to train now. Will you give up the place? Or not? Come on, let's fight. If you win, you're right. If you lose, you're wrong. If you're right, you're wrong. In this training ground, fighting for territory had to be decided in such a direct way. Every time this happened, both sides would ask their relatives and friends to help, including the awakened totem warriors. Xiao Xian saw Mao, Mor, and the others. But usually, they wouldn't do anything, and just watched from the side. The two sides had different families. They were either from Ta's hunting group, or from Gigu's group. Just at this time, Yang Guang and his sister came over and said they wanted to join. As they were on the same side, Xiao Xian naturally chose to accommodate them. But the other side didn't agree. They used the rules of their ancestors, and didn't want to give up. Yang Guang and his sister couldn't hold back, and kicked someone. The kid who was kicked in the face by Guang just now mocked Yang Guang and his sister. They must be afraid of heights. After learning the whole story, Xiao Xian looked at the stone tree. Different from other trees, there was a thick layer of ice on the surface of the stone tree. It was quite difficult to hang a stone card with one's name on the top of the tree without damaging it. Even for totem warriors, it was not easy to climb up. Xiao Xian looked at Yang Guang and his sister, who were wrapped up like fat rice dumplings, and then looked at the 50-meter-tall tree. Xiao Xian estimated that they would slide down the frozen trunk as soon as they jumped up, not to mention climbing up. Can't we use stone tools? Xiao Xian asked. No. That will damage the stone tree, but we don't restrict the rope. The one who spoke was about the same age as Yang Guang and his sister. He sounded a little arrogant, and there was a sense of gloominess between his eyebrows. After saying that, Meng Guang smiled sinisterly at them. His expression seemed to be saying, "Aren't you strong? Then throw it." His name is Meng. He is bad. He is the one who doesn't allow us to enter. Yang Guang complained to Xiao Xian. In such weather, with the cold wind and snow, many people who had not yet awakened their power were shivering. Some people thought that since Yang Guang and his sister could not do it, they might as well give up. They still wanted to watch today's competition. It was not a good idea to stand here in the cold. So, what do you want to do now? Xiao Xian looked at Yang Guang and his sister. Both of them looked frustrated. Even if they had a lot of ideas, they could not think of any solution at this time. Actually, we can put this matter aside for now. After we finish the competition, this place will belong to us for the next 20 days. Yang Guang can also train here. Mao walked over and said. Hearing Mao's words, a person behind Meng sneered, "You talk as if you are very powerful." Seeing that the two sides were about to quarrel again, Xiao Xian shook his head. The competition between the two sides was one thing, but the qualification to enter the competition was still a hot topic. Actually, it is not difficult. Xiao Xian said. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, the people around who were about to quarrel all turned their heads to look at him. Not difficult? Was he bragging? Not only Meng's people, but also Mao and the others looked at Xiao Xian in confusion. They did not understand why Xiao Xian would say that. Can't we use stone tools? Xiao Xian asked again. No. Meng said. Can't we ask others for help? No. Except for that, we can ask others for help? Yes. That's easy. After saying that, Xiao Xian put his finger into his mouth and blew a whistle in front of hundreds of people. Chapter 107. The whistle spread far and wide in the wind and snow. Hearing Xiao Xian's whistle, some people were still confused. They didn't understand what Xiao Xian was trying to do. Others thought of something and their expressions changed. They looked up at the sky. Ah! Yang Guang and his sister shouted in surprise. They already knew what Xiao Xian was trying to do. They opened their eyes wide and looked at the sky. Even when the snow fell into their eyes, they just wiped it away hurriedly. After that, they continued staring, afraid that they would miss something. What's going on? Meng turned his head and asked the people behind him. That eagle. Meng looked in the direction that the other person was pointing at and looked at a certain spot in the sky. A small black dot appeared in the sky. Soon, the dot became bigger and bigger. Even the falling snow couldn't cover its figure as it flew over. Cha-cha. It's Cha-cha. Yang Guang and his sister were so happy that they wanted to jump a few times. Because they knew Xiao Xian, they knew a little about Cha-cha. The others all had their own thoughts. To many people in the tribe, Cha-cha was just like Caesar. They only had the permission of the shaman to move around in the tribe. Many people even thought that such prey had lost its sharpness in the forest. They didn't care about it. Even without the permission of the shaman, they might not take the initiative to hunt it. Just like the mentality of most warriors, hunting was more meaningful. For them, an animal that was no longer fierce was enough to be ignored. They often saw the eagle flying around in the sky, but they never thought deeply about what it could do. It wasn't that they were stupid. It was just that hundreds of years of thinking and views made them unable to think in that direction. Including Yang Guang and his sister. Cha-cha hovered high in the sky but didn't land. Xiao Xian raised his hand and made a gesture. Then, everyone saw the eagle in the sky fly towards Xiao Xian. It's so far. That bird can actually see his hand movements. Someone sighed softly. My father said that eagles can see rabbits very far away. Another person said. Amazing. Then it can also see danger from afar? If it can really see danger, then father and the others wouldn't have to take the risk. Someone said. The discussion in the surroundings suddenly stopped. That's right. If it can see danger from afar and give it a warning in advance, when they go out hunting, they can avoid some unnecessary trouble. Everyone thought. But they still didn't think that a beast could do that. It wasn't a human and couldn't speak. It was just a bird that could fly. Whoosh! A black figure flashed past, and even the surrounding snowflakes were forcefully changed direction. Everyone looked. Following the sound of wings flapping, Cha-cha landed on Xiao Xian's outstretched arm. Cha-cha didn't have stage fright even with so many people around. Its eagle eyes swept around and then it pecked at its feathers. Xiao Xian lowered his arm so that Yang Guang and his sister could talk to Cha-cha better. Cha-cha, help me hang this on that tree. There are branches at the top of the tree. Any branch will do. Yang Guang and his sister took out the stone card in their hands and said to Cha-cha. The stone card wasn't big. It was less than half the size of their palms. It was tied with a leather string. Many children in the mountains had such a stone card. Some were prepared when they were born and some were written later. Even if many people didn't know how to use such a stone card, they would make one for themselves when they saw others making one. The stone card was made of medium to high-quality stones. The leather string was also made of ferocious beast skin. It wouldn't break easily. While Yang Guang and his sister were holding the stone card and talking to Cha-cha, the others were also staring at them. Most of them still didn't believe it. Seeing that Yang Guang and his sister were talking to Cha-cha like that, they couldn't believe it. Can it understand? The beasts in the mountains are also very smart. Even if it can understand, can it do what it says? It can't be, right? My father said that the birds in the mountains are very ferocious. How can it be obedient? Some people were whispering to each other about their understanding of the eagle. When they turned their heads, they saw Yang Guang and Guang Guang reach out to touch the eagle. Everyone stopped talking and stared at the eagle. Cha-cha was a little impatient. Every time they touched it. Seeing Cha-cha pecking at Yang Guang and his sister's hands, everyone's heart was in their throat. Even Meng and many other young totem warriors were staring at them without blinking. Those who had hunted before naturally knew how ferocious this kind of bird was. The man who was kicked by Guang just now was still laughing in his heart. Look, he was pecked. It was said that a peck from an eagle could cut off a piece of meat. However, to everyone's surprise, the brother and sister who were pecked didn't have any wounds on their hands. Sure enough, this bird was raised to the point that it didn't even know how to peck. Its soft pecking was simply incomparable to those eagles in the mountains. Some people suddenly showed a look of disdain. Until a man next to Mao approached Cha-Cha with a wooden stick. He wanted to touch it but didn't dare, so he had to use the stick to test it. As a result, before the stick could get close, Cha-Cha flapped his wings and pecked at the stick with all his strength. Tut! That man only felt that his hand holding the stick was a little numb. He looked at the place where the stick was pecked, and there was a hole on it. If the stick wasn't thick enough, it would have been pecked through. Now, no one said anything. If anyone didn't believe it, they could try it with their hands. However, no one was a fool. Cha-Cha still wanted to attack the man who stretched out the stick, but was stopped by Xiao-Xian. Unauthorized people will be attacked if they come close, Xiao-Xian said. At this time, Yang Guang and his sister had finished talking with Cha-Cha. They handed over the stone card in their hands. The 2 stone cards were stacked together with a leather rope. They even rubbed together to make it look like a rope. Cha-Cha, if you can help me, I will ask my father for some ferocious beast meat for you when we go back, Guang said. Go. Xiao-Xian raised his arm. Cha-Cha exerted force on its claws and flapped its wings. When it flew up, it grabbed Yang Guang and his sister's stone card. In the blink of an eye, it had spread its wings and was in the sky. Xiao-Xian had done similar training before, and it was even more difficult than this. Therefore, the task of hanging Yang Guang and his sister's stone card on the branch at the top of the stone tree was quite simple for Cha-Cha. Xiao-Xian wasn't worried. At the side of the training ground, everyone looked at the eagle flying towards the stone tree. While everyone was thinking about when it would slow down and what to do when it got close to the tree, Cha-Cha didn't slow down. It flew past the branch at the top of the stone tree like the wind. Many people didn't see Cha-Cha's movements clearly. In their eyes, the eagle just flew past the tree quickly and didn't do anything. It didn't do as we said. Someone said. It seemed that it should be like this, but there was also an indescribable disappointment. No, it has already hung the stone card. The person standing behind Meng said. After all, totem warriors were different from unawakened people. Their eyesight was also much better. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone heard a ding sound from above. It was the sound of the stone card hitting the ice on the branch. After the stone card was hung, it would slide down along the tip of the branch. In this kind of weather, soon the leather rope on the stone card would be covered by the ice, just like the other stone cards. No matter how strong the wind was, it wouldn't be blown off. When winter ended, the ice layer on the branches would melt, and grayish-white leaves would grow from the tips. These leaves would also prevent the wind from blowing the stone tablet off. Therefore, unless someone deliberately went up to take the stone tablet off, generally speaking, no matter how strong the wind, it would be very difficult to blow the stone tablet off from the top. Meng's expression kept changing. How could they use such a method? But it didn't violate the rules. They had never thought about it, and had always thought that wild beasts and ferocious beasts were used to hunt, and were in a state of opposition to humans. Why were wild beasts so obedient? Caesar was like that, and even this eagle was like that too. Among the people present, some people looked at the eagle that returned to Xiao-Xian's arm thoughtfully. When they couldn't do it, when they racked their brains and couldn't come up with a perfect solution, they didn't know that it could be done this way. Chapter 108. After completing the task, Xiao-Xian let Cha-Cha, who was already impatient, fly away. Speaking of which, Xiao-Xian took advantage of the loophole in the rules, which was a bit of a bully. However, the current situation was a bit special. The other party was forcing them to do something they didn't want to do. In the past, they would just bend the rules directly. Under such circumstances, no one could climb up the stone tree. At the same time, Xiao Xian also knew Yang Guang and his sister well. Although they had Cha-Cha's help now, they would still climb up once the ice on the stone tree melted after winter. Even if they only climbed up to touch the stone card, it would make them feel at ease. Only then would they be justified. Sure enough, after Cha-Cha flew away, looking at Meng's gloomy face, Guang snorted, "After winter ends, if we don't awaken, we will climb up again. Just you wait." Yang nodded at the side, "I will climb too." Although Cha-Cha had flown away, the situation just now had left a deep impression in many people's minds. It didn't matter how much it affected them. If they encountered similar situations in the future, they might remember it again. Children's ability to accept things was stronger than adults. Changing one's mind naturally started from a young age. Moreover, after this winter ended, Xiao Xian planned to bring Caesar out for the next year's hunt. He also hoped that everyone would gradually accept this method. In the pictures drawn by the ancestors of the tribe, there were also scenes of hunting with hunting dogs. Perhaps one day, such a grand scene would appear again. The witch's attitude was the same. "All right, since the matter is settled, I'll go back," Xiao Xian said to Yang Guang and his sister. "Don't go. Brother Xian, we still have a duel later." "I want to fight," Guang said. When the people on Meng's side heard this, they immediately started shouting. "Guang, you're not allowed to fight." "That's right, you can ask Yang to do it." "Yes, yes, yes." "Yang, how could you let your sister participate in the battle?" Previously, they had deliberately made things difficult for Yang Guang and his sister. One reason was that both sides were fighting for territory, and they wanted to discuss the other. Another important reason was that Guang was very strong, and she was a girl. If she were to fight, Mongols would not be able to find a suitable candidate. Now that someone told Yang to come, they all shouted in response. Xiao Xian looked at this group of kids and laughed in his heart. This group of silly children, they were still aware that they had been deceived by the two siblings. Just now, when someone had asked for Yang to come, the two siblings couldn't help but smile. 2 out of 3 matches, each side would send out 3 people. Xiao Xian, Mao, and the others were standing aside and watching. The fight between kids who hadn't awakened their totemic power was very simple. They were not allowed to use stone tools, and fought with their bare hands. They had learned all their moves from their elders. However, because they had never hunted before, their strength was not high enough, and they were wearing thick clothes, their momentum was naturally much weaker. Xiao Xian looked at the kids on the field. Because they were wearing too much, they looked like 2 fat dumplings bumping into each other. Xiao Xian almost laughed out loud. However, for these kids, this was a very serious matter. Xiao Xian also kept a straight face. Just as Xiao Xian had expected, after Yang went on the field, he had thrown his opponent to the ground 3 times in less than 2 breaths. The 4th time, he directly pressed his opponent to the ground and beat him until he admitted defeat. It seemed that Yang had been suppressing his anger for a long time, and now he wanted to vent it out. Looking at the expressions of the people around, except for those who already knew what would happen, the others were all very excited. In the end, Meng was the only one who won 1 match, and lost the other 2. They didn't need to come for the next 20 days. There was one good thing about the children in the tribe. After they lost, they wouldn't find too many excuses, and they wouldn't deliberately trip others up. Wherever they fell, they would get up again. If they lost, they would fight back the next time. Yang Guang, his sister, and the others were cheering, and they were even discussing how many stone tools they would bring tomorrow. The young warriors were also about to leave. However, when Xiao Xian was about to leave, someone on the other side said, "Wait. What? What do you want to say after losing? Do you want to fight in person, Lei?" Mao said sarcastically. The Lei mentioned by Mao was the one who had been standing behind Meng just now. Lei awakened his totemic power a year earlier than the others, and he was older than Xiao Xian and Mao when he awakened his totemic power. All in all, he was 2 years older than Xiao Xian. He was also the best warrior among the group of people who awakened their totemic power that year, and he brought back the most praise. He had awakened his totemic power for 2 years, and he was already older than Xiao Xian, so now he was even taller than Xiao Xian by a head. Lei just glanced at Mao casually. If I fight in person, do you think you can beat me? He said that with disdain, as if he was bullying unawakened kids. Before Mao could refute, Lei moved his eyes away, and looked at Xiao Xian. I have someone here who wants to talk with Xian. Usually Xian is learning herbs from the shaman, so it's hard to find him. Since we met today, why don't we practice our skills? It's also a good chance to show the unawakened ones what a totemic warrior level competition is like. When Lei said, totemic warrior level, his tone was full of pride. Not only Lei, but the others were also excited when they heard this. The young totemic warriors wanted to show off, while the unawakened ones were looking forward to it. Their parents' generation was their parents' generation, and their generation had their own competition. As soon as Lei finished his words, someone stood out. Tai. Mao looked at the person who stood out and frowned. Tai, Xiao Xian, and Mao were all awakened in the same batch, but Tai was in another hunting group, so Xiao Xian didn't know him well. Tai stretched his wrists, looked at Xiao Xian, and said, I heard you are the best in our batch of awakened ones, and I've been wanting to fight with you for a long time. Hearing Tai's words, someone on Mao's side couldn't help but say, how can he be the best in our batch? Shut up. Mao glared at the one who just spoke. He wasn't convinced, but he remembered that Xiao Xian did much better than him in the last hunting trip. Besides, if it weren't for Xiao Xian, he would have been eaten by the thorn-black wind. His father also told him that he was no match for Xiao Xian for the time being. Although it had been half a year since Xiao Xian said those words, Mao had been making progress all the time, and he improved faster than most of the kids in the tribe. Because he and Xiao Xian were not in the same hunting group, and Xiao Xian wasn't in the advanced group, neither Mao nor Ta knew about Xiao Xian's current strength. Mao didn't believe that Xiao Xian hadn't made any progress in the past half a year. Just look at the game he brought back every time. Xian. Mao looked at Xiao Xian, wondering what he meant. Xiao Xian didn't want to compete with him in this way, but he couldn't refuse. If he made an excuse at this time, he would be regarded as a coward. If someone challenged him, he had to accept it. People in the tribe had always been like this. Since he couldn't refuse, he would accept the challenge. It was a good chance for him to see how powerful the kids in the same batch as him were. Putting down the things in his hands, Xiao Xian said to Yang Guang and his sister, help me keep an eye on them. Ever since Tai stepped forward, there was an empty space around him. Xiao Xian walked into the field, looking at the kid who was about the same height as him. Tai's eyes flashed with hostility. The cloak he was wearing had already been thrown aside. Wearing a sleeveless animal skin coat on such a cold day, it was hard to tell if he was trying to show off the difference between a totem warrior and an unawakened child, or if he was trying to make it easier for him to move around, or if he was trying to show off his totem patterns during the fight. Showing off the totem tattoos on their arms was indeed one of their hobbies. Tai rotated his arms and wrists, making cracking sounds. With a loud roar, the totemic power in his body instantly pulsed. The totemic patterns that belonged to totemic warriors extended from his face to his exposed neck and extended down to his exposed arms. The totemic patterns were very obvious as well. The flame tattoos extended 5 or 6 centimeters from his shoulders to his arms. Seeing the totem tattoos on Tai's body, many unawakened kids were envious. Every time they compared the totem tattoos on their arms, they could only stand aside and watch. Among the awakened kids in the same batch, Tai's speed of improvement was quite fast. Because Tai always kept a high profile on the mountain, everyone knew about his level. Then, the crowd turned their eyes to the other side of the field. They knew very little about Xiao Xian's current strength since he came out of the cave under the mountain. Unlike Tai, who kept a high profile, Xiao Xian was as quiet as a piece of wood. Chapter 109. The scene looked a little strange. If he didn't know that the two were going to compete, he would have thought that Xiao Xian was asleep. The snow was still falling, and the cold wind was blowing. Some of the unawakened children wrapped themselves in animal skins, but their eyes were fixed on the other side. Tai waited for a long time, but still didn't see any reaction from Xiao Xian. He wondered what Xiao Xian meant. Did he really want to compete with him? Or was he playing with him? Thinking of this, Tai couldn't help but feel a little angry. Ray and the others were also confused. Not taking it seriously? Not in the right state? No, that's not right. Ray's eyes flashed. Aura. When hunting, warriors would have a habitual way of hiding their aura. Before hunting, they couldn't let the prey detect them. Therefore, the warriors would hide their aura. Many of the older warriors had already made it a habit. They would carry this habit with them when they walked, making no sound. In contrast, most of the younger warriors didn't have such a habit. Of course, it wasn't something that could be done just because they wanted to. There was no need to do it deliberately. It was just a habit that was formed naturally after many hunts. Inadvertently, they had already entered the best state. In the past, when the elders in his family practiced with Ray, they were in such a state. There was no fighting spirit, no totem patterns, and they looked careless. But once they attacked, they would instantly kill the enemy. However, that was a habit that only warriors who had hunted for many years had. How long had this person been hunting? It had only been a year since he awakened. Moreover, this person was 2 years younger than him. Thinking of this, Ray's eyebrows couldn't help but twitch. He opened his eyes wide and stared at the other side. He wanted to see if the next development was as he expected. That's enough. Xiao Xian, who was still like a block of wood, said. Originally, Tai was quite angry when he saw Xiao Xian like this. He wanted to say something, but he was a little surprised. However, since Xiao Xian had said so, he didn't care about anything else. However, there was a faint sense of uneasiness in his heart, but he couldn't explain why. As for Xiao Xian, Tai's understanding of him was limited to the discussions of the people in the tribe. For example, he had found his ancestor, he had been accepted into the advance party, and he had raised a wolf and a bird that had no spirit at all. There were also some who said that Xiao Xian was the most outstanding among their batch of awakened, but Tai had always been skeptical about this. How powerful could a person who was about the same age as him, who had awakened at the same time as him, and who came from a cave under the mountain be? He had never heard of Xiao Xian defeating anyone. All right. Tai stomped hard on the ground and rushed towards Xiao Xian. With every step he took, the snow on the ground was blown away by his powerful stomps. Muffled thuds could be heard from the ground due to his powerful stomps. A ferocious aura spread out. The people around could clearly feel the pressure brought by Tai at this moment. It could be seen that Tai's explosive power was indeed astonishing. On the other hand, Xiao Xian was still standing there like a block of wood. He did not put up a defensive posture, nor did he reveal any totem patterns. Was this guy stupid? Everyone was puzzled. Not only the others, but even Tai, who was already swinging his fist at Xiao Xian, was also puzzled. However, since he had already made his move, there was no reason to take it back. No matter what he was thinking, he would fight first. Bang! Fist and flesh collided. What was this? All the emotions in Tai's heart turned into shock. How was this possible? This was the same thought that emerged in everyone's mind at the same time. At this moment, Tai felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He was frozen in place, his hair standing on end. Although the wind was howling in the heavy snow, his back was drenched in sweat. He looked at the palm that blocked his fist. It was about the same size as his palm, and looked normal, but it stopped his fist from moving forward. His line of sight followed the palm that blocked his fist. The palm was covered by an animal skin sleeve, and the arm was not exposed. He could not see how far the totem patterns in front of him had spread. Further up was a face that was already covered with totem patterns. A moment ago, there was no trace of totem patterns, but now, Xiao Xian's totem patterns did not spread gradually like Tai's. The totem patterns on his face seemed to have appeared suddenly at that moment. Everyone knew that the totem patterns on the body appeared gradually from the top to the bottom. The speed at which they appeared was closely related to the user's control of totem power. The stronger the control of totem power, the faster the totem patterns would appear. However, the totem patterns on Xiao Xian's face appeared without any warning. In an instant, they all appeared. What level of mastery did this person have over the totem power? No one wanted to think too deeply. Tai met Xiao Xian's eyes, and his scalp went numb. He looked at Xiao Xian's eyes as if he was looking at a ferocious beast that had just bared its fangs and was about to break his arm in the next moment. Retreat. This was the only thought in Tai's mind at the moment. Tai put his feet on the ground and wanted to retreat, but he soon found that he could not retreat. The 5 fingers of the hand that had been blocking the fist had already bent and firmly grasped the fist that he had swung out. Ray, who was standing at the side, closed his eyes. One move to determine the winner. There was no need to continue. He did not know that someone in the tribe had reached such a level. His great-grandfather had once told him that he should have a long-term vision and not just look at the people around him. However, he had never thought that there was anyone in the tribe who was worth paying attention to except the people on the mountain. Now it seemed that he was still too narrow-minded. When he opened his eyes again, the shock on Ray's face had disappeared. Tai, you lost, Ray said calmly. Lost? Tai, who was about to retreat, was stunned for a moment before he came to his senses. Yes, he lost. Tai only felt that the hand that held his fist loosened, and he could not withdraw his arm. He regained his freedom again. I lost, Tai said. Tai looked up at the person in front of him again and found that the totem patterns on Xiao Xian's face had disappeared completely, as if they had never appeared. The fist that hits the tiger should hit the tiger's head, Xiao Xian said. That's right. Ray thought for a moment and said, it's really boring to fight in the tribe. I understand what you mean. Xiao Xian looked at Ray. What do you understand? He felt that something was wrong. Ray felt that he had understood Xiao Xian's words, so he continued, just like how we walk the road of glory every year, the prey is the best way to measure our ability. The others also showed an expression that said, that's right. Even Tai, who had been a little depressed, immediately felt refreshed. Good. Then let's compete with the prey. Count me in, Ray said. In hunting, it was not always about fighting that one could hunt more prey. There were many other factors. After the adjustment in the first year of awakening, they were already experienced warriors from the second year onwards. They did not need to give in anymore. I want to join, too, Mao said. With Ray and Mao taking the lead, the other young warriors also clamored to join. Xiao Xian, who was standing next to them, was speechless. That was not what I meant. Xiao Xian originally just wanted to say that instead of fighting with their own people, they might as well go back and practice more. When they went out hunting next year, they could use their killing skills on the prey. In the competition between tribes, because the stone tools were not durable, and the high-quality stone tools were very precious. Except for hunting, they were not willing to take them out. Therefore, when they competed, they only fought with their bare hands. Wooden sticks were only suitable for people who had not awakened yet. It was okay to use such competitions to communicate with each other. They could practice and exercise when they had nothing to do. But if they wanted to compete with each other, it was not necessary. This was Xiao Xian's idea, because the behavior of totem warriors in daily life was completely different from that of hunting with tools. However, Xiao Xian did not expect that his words would be misunderstood like this. These people were so excited that even 10 wild beasts would not be able to pull them back from their thoughts. Since we have decided to compete with the prey, then, should we compete with one prey or quantity? Someone asked. Mao and Lei looked at Xiao Xian at the same time. Xian, since you proposed it, how do you want to compete? Mao asked. Proposed my ass. Xiao Xian raised his hand and rubbed his forehead. If he could, he really wanted to swallow the words he just said and change them to something more straightforward. His words caused so much trouble. What a cheap mouth. However, after thinking about it carefully, this method was actually not bad. It was much better to compete with each other than having a civil war in the tribe. After a year of hunting, the young warriors had matured a lot. They knew that they could not be impulsive in the hunting field. Under this premise, it was also a good thing to strive for better and more prey. Too short a time was definitely not good. It was inevitable that some people would be eager for quick success. Moreover, they belonged to two hunting groups, so the environment would affect them. Let's do it for a year. Next winter, we will compete with each other with the results of a year. Xiao Xian said. Mao and Lei also thought it was a good idea. Okay, let's do it for a year. There were too many people who wanted to join, so Lei said, why don't we use animal skin rolls to record the names of those who want to join the competition? I have animal skin. A young warrior took out a piece of animal skin. Where's a pen? Who has a pen? And paint? Mao looked at the people behind him. Use this. Xiao Xian took out a charcoal pencil he made himself and handed it over. What is this? Can you write? Someone asked. It was the first time for many people to see Xiao Xian's charcoal pencil, but Mao used to be in the same hunting group as Xiao Xian, so he knew how to use it. Taking the charcoal pencil, Mao wrote his name on the animal skin roll. After that, he handed the pencil to Xiao Xian. When Xiao Xian finished, the pencil was snatched away by Lei. He grabbed the pencil like a stone knife and wrote his name. After that, the other warriors also scrambled to write their names. In the end, all the totem warriors present, including Moer, Ku, and the others, wrote down their names and joined the year-long competition. Like Moer, there were many people who were not interested in fighting. However, they felt that it was better to compete with prey. Yangguang, and some others who had not yet awakened their powers, or who might awaken their powers after the end of this winter, were all eager to have a try. However, they could only stand aside, because Lei and Mao would not allow them to join the competition. Newly awakened warriors would have a long time to adjust and adapt at the beginning. Everyone didn't want them to be too impatient and disregard the rules of the hunting team, such as Hoodlum, who had almost caused trouble. Therefore, the group of fat dumplings could only stand by the side, wrapped in thick animal skins, and glared angrily. Chapter 110. Because of the one-year promise and the animal skin scroll signed by so many young warriors, no one cared about who won or lost the previous fight for the territory. Winning or losing in the fight for territory was a matter for those little brats, but this challenge scroll was a competition between totem warriors. Which one was more important and more attractive? It was obvious. Xiao Xian had been delayed on the mountain for a long time. When he came down from the mountain, he was a little later than usual. Is there a lot going on in the medicine house today? Or is there something wrong with the shaman? Seeing that Xiao Xian had just come back, old Ku asked nervously. It's nothing. The medicine house didn't have many tasks today, so I left early. I just met some people on the mountain and we talked for a while. Xiao Xian said. Old Ku was relieved after hearing this. He even agreed with Xiao Xian and said, it's good for you to talk more with other people on the mountain. Okay, I know. After eating something, Xiao Xian went back to his room. He rolled up his sleeves and slowly activated the totem power in his body. This time, it was different from the time on the mountain. Xiao Xian slowly controlled the totem power, and the totem pattern on his arm gradually showed up. The flame-shaped pattern extended from his shoulder to his arm. It went past 1/3 of his upper arm, half of his upper arm, 2/3. The totem pattern extended all the way to 2/3 of his upper arm and stopped. During the last hunt of the year, Xiao Xian remembered that the totem pattern on his arm only went past half of the way, not 2/3 of the way. After the hunt, Xiao Xian didn't have much time to train at the training ground. After that, he began to learn about herbs from the shaman and how to draw Wu roll. How to draw Wu roll. The power of inheritance. Xiao Xian felt the totem in his mind. The fiery red flames enveloped the two horns, and at the bottom of the flames near the horns, the blue flames were clearly visible. Compared to when he first learned Wu roll, the number of blue flames had increased by a lot, but the number of red flames had not decreased. On the contrary, the flames had grown even taller. Now that it was not in a state of battle or hunting, such a flame body meant that it usually maintained this state. Xiao Xian hadn't noticed it before, but when he was drawing the Wu roll, he had been staring at the blue flame that symbolized the power of inheritance. Now, it seemed that the addition of the blue flame had also expanded the overall flame on the totem. Practicing the power of inheritance actually had such benefits? Xiao Xian hadn't expected this at all. No wonder Xiao Xian felt that his control over his totemic power was much more stable than it had been during their last hunt. He didn't expect to defeat Tai in one move, and he thought that it would take a while to determine the winner. However, the moment Tai revealed his totemic patterns, Xiao Xian suddenly had a feeling that the person in front of him was not that strong, and that he could deal with him easily. Xiao Xian didn't know if the other people whose totemic patterns had spread to 2/3 of their upper arms had the same feeling. He carefully recalled the situation at that time, and carefully felt the changes of the totem. Then, with a wave of his arm, he took out the animal skin roll, pen, and paint box, and continued to draw the Wu roll. The people on the mountain only came back to their senses after Xiao Xian left. Tai said regretfully, "I forgot to ask him where his totemic patterns are now." Ray looked at the place where Xiao Xian had been standing. There was a pair of sunken footprints, which appeared when Xiao Xian fought Tai, but no one had noticed it before. "You don't need to worry about his current level, as long as we can defeat him before next winter," said Ray. "You're right," Tai agreed, rubbing his fists. While the other young warriors in the tribe were thinking about what kind of prey to hunt next year, and how much to hunt, Xiao Xian still maintained his previous routine. In the morning, he would go to the shaman's place to draw, and in the afternoon, he would go to the medicine house to help. After that, he would return home and stay in his room, slowly moving his pen drawing on the animal skin roll. Winter passed day by day. Xiao Xian went to the cave once, and found that some of the children were sleeping, while the older ones were moving stones to train their strength. It was good to have such a change. There was no shortage of food in the cave now, except for the fish they had stocked up before winter. Sometimes, the cha-cha would go out and catch some small animals. If they didn't want to eat them, they would throw them to the children in the cave. Everything was developing in a good direction. Xiao Xian stretched himself and looked at the almost finished drawing on the stone table in front of him. Drawing a picture was not as difficult as it used to be. In the beginning, he needed to rest for half a day to draw one picture, but now, he could draw several pictures in half a day. After that, he could go out and train Caesar and Cha-Cha. The shaman gave him 2 animal skin rolls, one of which Xiao Xian took up the mountain every day to practice copying the Wu roll or drawing by himself, and then he would show it to the shaman to check the results. As for the other one, Xiao Xian practiced it at home, so the shaman didn't know. In the shaman's eyes, it was already very rare for Xiao Xian to draw so many pictures every day, and it had already exceeded his expectations. The shaman would never have thought that Xiao Xian would draw on the other animal skin roll every day after he went back. It was not a copy, but an original drawing based on his own consciousness. Xiao Xian planned to give the drawings he was drawing to the shaman when the time came. The shaman taught him herbs and taught him how to control the power of inheritance. Xiao Xian also wanted to repay the shaman. For the tribe, he had to stay here and sacrifice a lot. It was difficult to be the shaman. However, the shaman probably didn't think so. Even though Xiao Xian felt that it was not easy to sit in this position, the shaman probably didn't think so. It was just that the shaman always had some regrets in his heart. Xiao Xian could see it in the shaman's eyes every time he looked at Wu Roll. It's almost done. Xiao Xian looked at the animal skin roll in front of him and said in a low voice. Before the end of winter, the people in the tribe were ready to start selecting children of age. The shaman was busy these days, so he didn't even have time to see the results of Xiao Xian's drawings these days. On this day, the shaman finally had some free time to sit down and rest with his eyes closed. Suddenly, he thought of something and looked sideways at the animal skin roll on the short table. Xiao Xian put it here after he finished practicing this morning. At that time, he was busy with other things and couldn't see it. Taking the animal skin roll, the shaman felt that something was wrong as soon as he touched it. This animal skin roll was not the one Xiao Xian usually practiced with. Could it be that the kid had already finished drawing one in a few days? With doubts, the shaman untied the leather rope that tied it. When he untied it, the shaman thought that every time he saw the kid draw Wu Roll, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Why didn't he want to be a shaman? Sure enough, once the warriors ran out, they couldn't stop thinking about it. Children who had never gone out were easier to train. He opened the Wu Roll. The shaman thought that Xiao Xian would draw some simple plants, such as jumping fruits, or some herbs that he came in contact with these days, but he didn't expect. His hands were trembling badly. On the Wu Roll, the first picture was a little long. If other people saw it, they would never understand what it was about. But what the shaman saw was the huge vines between the ancient trees, the mist rising from the mountains, and the faintly discernible pools hidden by the trees. He could faintly feel the vitality and danger in it, which made him feel as if his hair was trembling with nervousness. This was a picture full of the smell of the forest. After looking at the first picture, the shaman raised his hand and put it on his chest. His heart was beating a little fast. Many shamans were taught from a young age. After they were selected, they would never leave the tribe. Therefore, the shaman had never left the tribe since he was born. Although he knew a lot of things, such as the names of the ferocious beasts that the hunting team would encounter, and where the advance group would go, etc. But he only knew about it, and had never seen it with his own eyes. Even if he saw it, it was not an active one. The prey that was brought back had already been slaughtered. Maybe when he was young, he dreamed that one day he could walk out of the tribe. But as he grew older and had been a shaman for so many years, he had calmed down and become a shaman with a heavy responsibility. He wanted to lead the tribe in a good direction. As a shaman, there were not many things that could make him so emotional at this age. But at this moment, the shaman couldn't control his emotions anymore. One picture after another, there were pictures of the hunting route, and also pictures of what Xiao Xian encountered when he followed the advance group, such as the group of Dragonfly Plains. The shaman read it once, and then he came back and read it again. The people outside boiled some hot water, and brought some herbs in for the shaman to drink when he was thirsty. The people who came in walked silently, and put down the stone cup carefully, for fear of disturbing the shaman. When he walked out of the door, he glanced at the shaman, thinking that the shaman might be reading another book left by an ancestor. Every time he read something left by an ancestor, the shaman would be particularly emotional. On the other side, Xiao Xian left the finished Wu Roll, and went to the medicine house to help. When he got home, old Ku was already walking around the door, as if he was in a hurry. He walked around in a circle, and hit his crutch hard twice. What's wrong? Xiao Xian asked. You're back. Old Ku stepped forward, and his mouth trembled. He couldn't say anything for a long time. Calm down first. I can't calm down. Old Ku breathed heavily. After a while, he finally recovered and said, the shaman sent a message. Well, what did the shaman say? The shaman asked you to prepare for the ceremony after the end of winter. Isn't everyone going to attend the ceremony? Xiao Xian was confused. What was so exciting about that? It's the core list. The group of people who are closest to the fire pit. Old Ku hit his crutch hard. Old Ku now had a sense of pride, as if his own child had finally made a name for himself. Although Xiao Xian had made contributions before, and was praised by the shaman, and could learn from him, the ceremony was extremely sacred for the people in the tribe. Anyone who could participate in the ceremony would be so happy that they would kneel down and kowtow to the mountain, not to mention the group of people who were closest to the fire pit. After all, they were not aborigines. In the past 2 years, although Xiao Xian tried his best to integrate into the tribe, he couldn't change his mind, so he wasn't as excited as Old Ku. Old Ku was quite enthusiastic. What should we wear? Xian, where did you put your clothes made of thorn black wind skin? Take it out and let me wipe it. Thorn black wind skin. I wore it once during the ceremony, and then threw it under the bed. It wasn't because it was too heavy, it was nothing for Xiao Xian. It was just that he felt like he was playing a little monster, and there were thorns on his back. Old Ku took the thorn black wind skin and left to clean it carefully, leaving Xiao Xian standing in the room. The group of people who were closest to the fire pit? Who were these people again? Thinking about it, Xiao Xian's eyelids suddenly twitched. Damn, those people who danced the ceremony dance. It was the kind of dance that sometimes looked like digging vegetables, sometimes shaking their breasts, and sometimes like a waiter shaking a rag. I feel a bit ashamed. Chapter 111. The old ancient dance was also known as the sacrificial dance in the tribe. Not everyone could learn it. At the end of every winter, during the snow festival, 50 people would be selected to perform the sacrificial dance next to the fire pit. These 50 people were all elites recognized by the tribe. However, as far as Xiao Xian knew, the 50 people on the list had always been young warriors with several years of hunting experience, as well as some people who had made great contributions to the tribe. For hundreds of years, it was very rare for a teenager to be on the list. What's more, Xiao Xian had only been awakened for 1 year. At first, it sounded a little ridiculous. When Old Ku heard this from the messenger, his first reaction was disbelief. Normal people in the tribe wouldn't believe it. However, the messenger also made it clear that it was the shaman who decided it, and he asked Xiao Xian to prepare as soon as possible. No wonder Old Ku was so excited. As an important part of the sacrificial ceremony in the tribe, in addition to the people chosen, the ancient teachings passed down in the tribe also had to be followed. However, Xiao Xian had never understood the so-called ancient teachings. It seemed that the ancient teachings were not just simple instructions. Since Xiao Xian didn't have anyone who could teach him the sacrificial dance, even Xiaomai and his wife had never learned it, Xiao Xian could only go up the mountain to find the shaman. Early the next morning, Xiao Xian carried the stone box and ran to the shaman's place. The shaman was discussing the upcoming sacrificial ceremony with the chief and the 2 team leaders. There were many things that needed to be prepared in advance. Seeing Xiao Xian's arrival, the 2 team leaders and Chief Ao looked at him with subtle expressions. Xiao Xian's addition to the list of 50 was also out of their expectations. However, the other day, when the shaman called them over, he directly told them to let Xiao Xian in. They knew about the 1-year promise between the juniors, and they also knew that Xiao Xian had blocked Tai's attack with just 1 move. In terms of strength, Xiao Xian was indeed the most outstanding of the young warriors who had awakened in the past 2 years. In addition, Xiao Xian had indeed made great contributions last year. Therefore, when the shaman decided to let Xiao Xian enter the list of 50 people, the 2 team leaders and the leader did not object. In the eyes of the people in the tribe, it was an honor to be on the list of 50. However, the 2 team leaders who knew the secret of the list had more ideas. Every year, they would try their best to recommend people from their own hunting groups to the shaman to compete for the spots. In addition to these people, Xiao Xian also saw Tua here. Xian, I'll let Tua teach you the sacrificial dance. As for the painting, the shaman's smile deepened, you can stop for a while. Chief Ao looked at the shaman, and then looked at Xiao Xian. He always felt that something had happened that he did not know. But sometimes, the shaman was like this. It was hard to guess what he was thinking. Okay. Xiao Xian answered. Xiao Xian did not stay in the stone house any longer, so he left with Tuo. Tuo lived on the mountain, so it did not take long for them to arrive. Moreover, Tuo was also on the list of 50 people this year. Tuo's father and ancestors had all been on the list of 50 people. Therefore, this ancient dance had been passed down. He did not need to find someone else to learn it, because he was very familiar with it. Otherwise, the shaman would not let him teach Xiao Xian. In fact, Tuo was very surprised when he received the instructions from the shaman. After all, Xiao Xian was still young, and he was only a junior totem warrior who had awakened for a year. How could he be on the list of 50 people? Perhaps it was because he had found his ancestors, Tuo thought. I learned the ritual dance a long time ago. It's not difficult. Tuo said, I'll do it first. Watch. After saying that, Tuo began to dance in the house. His movements were still very funny in Xiao Xian's eyes. There was no beauty in it, and it did not feel very harmonious. There was also a movement that looked like washing dishes. However, Tuo's facial expression was very serious when he was dancing, as if he was doing something solemn. Even if it was just a demonstration, he was not careless at all. After the first dance, Tuo taught Xiao Xian little by little. Bend your body forward like this. Stretch your hands back, Xiao Xian learned from Tuo. He swung his arms up, down, front and back. Sometimes he had to slap his arms and thighs, or shake and step, making a strong rhythmic sound. He also had to move his feet forward, back, left and right. Sometimes he had to lean forward, then squat down, then jump with one foot, and then do a horse step. His arms were like holding a horse pole, and he had to turn his head back every 3 steps. If Xiao Xian had seen such a dance in his previous life, he would probably have laughed until he fell down. But now, he had to brace himself to do it, and he had to keep a straight face to show his seriousness. Although there was no drum or whistle to accompany the beat, the dance still had to keep a specific rhythm. It was not only the movements. Tuo told Xiao Xian that when the ritual dance was dancing, it also needed to be combined with the power of the totem. There were also other ways to combine the breathing. These were also ancient teachings. In general, Xiao Xian came to a conclusion: when the ritual dance was dancing, it also needed to be combined with meditation and a specific breathing method. What was the use of such a combination? Tuo did not say it now, but Xiao Xian could guess that it should be related to the fire seed or the totem. Xiao Xian once heard that the earliest form of human performance was the dance posture and human body movements. Dance and body movements were also a kind of behavioral language to express people's passion and desire. Here, the ritual dance was used to communicate with the fire seed and the totem, so it needed to be perceived when dancing. Thinking that the ritual dance was used in the ritual, and thinking that the 2 team leaders had been fighting for the quota every year, maybe the ritual dance was really useful. As Tuo said, the movements were actually very simple, and could be learned very quickly. Among them, the most important was how to meditate when dancing, and combine it with a specific breathing method, and not be confused. When it was almost noon, Xiao Xian had already learned all the movements. Good, you learn very fast. You didn't make any mistakes just now. Tuo said. Xiao Xian moved his arms and nodded. I have to practice harder when I go back. Yes, you have to practice hard, and don't make any mistakes. Tuo stopped smiling and said seriously, if you have any doubts, you can come and ask me. Since the shaman gave him this task, he had to be responsible for teaching Xiao Xian. There was no room for mistakes in the ritual. When the last snowflake fell, the clouds in the sky dispersed, and the moon appeared again. After a quiet winter, the tribe became active again. The shaman had already informed the tribe about the time of the snow festival ritual. On the day of the ritual, Xiao Xian took a good bath, which was something everyone in the tribe had to do before the ritual. As for the cubs in the cave, they were dragged out to brush meat yesterday. Caesar and Cha-Cha stayed at home. Today, Cha-Cha was very obedient and didn't go anywhere. She seemed to have sensed something, so she didn't stay on the roof, but went into the house early in the morning. Beasts always had a natural instinct to avoid danger. Come on, put it on and try dancing. Old Ku took out the clean thorn black wind's leather clothes and let Xiao Xian get used to it. He was even more nervous than Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian's face twitched. He took the clothes from Old Ku and put on the thorny leather. In the past, when it came to dancing, most of the dancers were graceful women who swayed their hips and shoulders, and their steps were light and coordinated. But now, Xiao Xian felt like he was wearing Godzilla's body, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. Fortunately, the tribe was dressed like this today, and they were all beasts. Old Ku had already drawn patterns on his face with plant pigments, but Xiao Xian didn't. He needed to go up the mountain in advance. The patterns on the 50 people's faces were all drawn by the shaman, and the colors were different from Old Ku's. Then I'll go up the mountain first. Xiao Xian put on the thorn black wind's leather clothes and walked out of the door. Okay, go quickly. I'll go with Gu and the others later. Old Ku waved his hand and signaled Xiao Xian to go quickly. He didn't want the shaman to wait too long. There were 50 people, and only Xiao Xian was at the foot of the mountain. He didn't want others to look down on him. In front of the shaman's stone house, the others had already arrived. Many of them had already heard from the two team leaders that Xiao Xian was going to join them. So when they saw Xiao Xian, they were more surprised and didn't say much. For them, today was a very serious and solemn day. Who would have the time to think about other things? When the shaman finished drawing the patterns for the 50 people, the sky was already dark. Let's go. A middle-aged man in the team said. Because Xiao Xian had awakened his totemic power, he had grown a lot in the past year. But in the group of tall adult warriors, Xiao Xian was still very conspicuous. He was the shortest, and even though he was wearing animal skin, others could tell that he was still a child. Why is he there? Some people whispered as they walked towards the top of the mountain. Who is that? It's Xian. I know that thorn black wind skin. Only Xiao Xian could wear thorn black wind skin at this age. Did he really go to the right place? How could he be in the list of 50? How old is he? Shut up. That's the shaman's decision. In the crowd, some people were shocked, some were envious. Lang Jie and the others had already learned the truth from Old Ku, but even now, they still couldn't believe it. The list of 50 people was something they had wanted since they were young. But now, it was taken by someone much younger than them. On a circle of wooden stakes around the fire pit, stone basins were filled with fresh fruits and ferocious beast meat for the ceremony. Xiao Xian followed the team and walked to the side of a wooden pile. This was his current position. The ceremony was about to begin, and there were already many people at the top of the mountain. There were still people coming up the mountain, and many people were still talking about Xiao Xian. As the youngest of the 50 people, and the only one in the last 100 years who had been awakened for only 1 year, he naturally became the topic of everyone. This year, there were more than 80 children who were about to be awakened, 2 more than last year. Among them were Tu and Jia Ba from the cave, and Yang Guang and his sister from the Qiaomai family. The sky was completely dark. The steps were the same as in Xiao Xian's memory. When the shaman finally began to chant, Xiao Xian clearly felt the totem in his mind move. At the same time, the flame in the middle of the fire pit, which seemed to be difficult to burn even for the wooden stakes, jumped up and rolled up, as if a barrel of oil had been poured into it. In the blink of an eye, it began to expand and spread. As a totem warrior, his perception of totems was naturally stronger. The rising flame in the fire pit drove the totem in his mind to also begin to expand. When the fire pit was full of flames, the 2-horned totem wrapped in flames also appeared at the top of the flames. Chapter 112. The first flame of the 3 flames of the fire pit, soaring flame. Totem appeared. The totem power in their bodies became active even though they didn't actively activate it. The totem patterns on each totem warrior's face also appeared clearly. The blue and red colors in Xiao Xian's mind jumped along with the flames. Xiao Xian didn't know if it was his own illusion, but he felt that the flames in the fire pit were even higher and more intense than last year. It seemed that they would float out if he didn't pay attention. Standing next to the wooden stake, he couldn't move. Therefore, Xiao Xian couldn't observe other people's expressions. He didn't know if other people had the same idea, and he couldn't hear anything strange from the shaman's voice. Xiao Xian could only be suspicious. At this moment, the people present didn't think about anything else. They looked at the totem in the fire pit with pious eyes. The surroundings were lit up, and the whole mountaintop was covered with a layer of fire. The shaman's chanting became louder and louder. Dong! Dong dong! Drum beats with a specific rhythm, as well as the sound of bones and stones hitting, suddenly sounded. This meant that Xiao Xian was about to start dancing. With the shaman's chanting, the people next to the wooden stake began to dance along the fire pit. As an ancient dance that had been passed down since the founding of the tribe, Xiao Xian still underestimated it. It wasn't because the movements were difficult, nor was it because he was embarrassed to wash the dishes, dig the vegetables, and throw the rag in front of so many people. It was because when he started to dance, Xiao Xian really understood the mystery of the dance, and the awkwardness gradually disappeared. The sound of footsteps and the slight sound of the 50 people waving their arms gradually became unified and blended into the drumming sounds around them. The originally strange rhythm became harmonious with the addition of the sounds made by these sacrificial dancers. With a specific rhythm, one sound after another resounded throughout the mountaintop. Xiao Xian had been practicing the sacrificial dance at home these days. He memorized every movement by heart, and knew when to do which movement, so he didn't have stage fright. During the dance, Xiao Xian used the special breathing method of the sacrificial dance according to Tuo's ancient teachings to feel the connection between the totems. Gradually, Xiao Xian felt that he seemed to be connected with the surroundings. The totem in the fire pit and the totem in his mind seemed to be gradually synchronizing. Xiao Xian didn't know whether the former was assimilating the latter or the latter was influencing the former. He didn't know the situation of the totem in the other ritual dancers' minds, but he was carefully perceiving such changes. The only thing that was different was the blue flame in the totem in his mind, which was not present in the fire pit. The ancient teaching said, "Try your best to establish a connection with the totem in the fire pit." Xiao Xian felt that he hadn't completely connected with the totem in the fire pit, so he tried to mobilize the blue flame in his mind. With the accumulation of the blue flame in Xiao Xian's mind, the overall flame of the totem rose. At the same time, the flame in the fire pit suddenly rolled up, and the flame almost doubled in an instant. An experienced sacrificial dancer was so scared that he almost made a mistake. After all, he had never encountered such a thing after dancing for so many years. Fortunately, he had a strong ability to adapt, so he quickly calmed down and continued to dance. Everything around them continued. However, when they looked at the 50 people dancing around the fire pit, they felt that it was a little different from the previous years. It seemed that these people were no longer the sacrificial dancers dancing around the fire pit. They were no longer in such an occasion, but warriors armed with short swords and spears, ready to go hunting at any time. Even the experienced sacrificial dancers felt that this time was different from the previous years. They felt a kind of boiling feeling, which couldn't be calmed down. The momentum of 50 people in one was full of strong and fierce power, exuding a kind of invincible majestic spirit. If Xiao Xian had to make an analogy, even the action of washing dishes could make people feel that the momentum was strong and incomparable. Unknowingly, the fire pit had entered the second flame. Fireballs flew out radially from the fire pit. Because the original flame in the fire pit had risen, the fireballs flying out seemed to be bigger than in the previous years. With the breathing method and the perception of the totem in meditation, Xiao Xian could feel that every fireball was flying towards him. Contact and then absorption. Some new energy was flowing in his body, brought by the fireballs flying over. It flowed along the meridians and gathered in one place. The totem flame in his mind expanded rapidly with the newly absorbed fireballs. If the energy absorbed by others from the fireballs was like a trickle slowly accumulating, then the energy obtained by the people dancing around the fire pit was like rivers flowing into the sea. Xiao Xian thought that this was probably the advantage and benefit of being a sacrificial dancer. Xiao Xian heard from Mai and the others that the state of the totem in one's mind was closely related to the speed of improvement of one's strength. In this way, it was easy to imagine the benefits of being able to stay by the fire pit during the sacrificial ceremony. No wonder the two team leaders desperately wanted more people from their hunting groups to come here every year. But no matter what, there were only 50 places every year. The sacrificial ceremony was still going on, so Xiao Xian couldn't afford to be distracted. When the third flame was finished, the ceremony was about to come to an end. Xiao Xian didn't know what level the third flame had reached, but the shaman's great luck made the people on the mountaintop cheer. The 80 kids closest to the fire pit finished their awakening ceremony. Xiao Xian stopped and looked around. These kids all had totem patterns on their faces. He looked carefully and found that none of them were missing. In the past, there were always a few kids who failed to awaken and had to wait for another year. But this year, all of them succeeded. Not only Xiao Xian was surprised, but even the shaman didn't expect this result. 4 of them, the shaman thought that they would delay their awakening for a year during the pre-selection. But unexpectedly, they all woke up this time. The shaman glanced at Xiao Xian's back, then lowered his eyelids and listened to Chief Ao, who was walking towards him, talk about the idea of this sacrificial ceremony. He then went to prepare for the next step. After the ceremony, the people who came to participate in the sacrificial ceremony also went down the mountain to celebrate. The shaman had said, "Great luck." Xiao Xian went to talk to Tu and Ba for a while, then went down the mountain with old Ku. Turning around, Xiao Xian bumped into Qiao Mai and his wife, who had just finished talking to Yang Guang and his sister. "Xian, you still have 20 days to solve Caesar's problem," Mai said. "But, since you can be selected as one of the 50, it will be easier to solve Caesar's problem." Last year, Ta's hunting team set out for the first hunt, and they took turns. This year, it was Gigu's team's first hunt, followed by Ta's hunting team. Therefore, after the sacrificial ceremony, Xiao Xian still had 20 days to persuade the others in the hunting team, and he also needed to talk to Ta. In the end, it was still the big head Ta who made the final decision. Well, he also needed to talk to the shaman. Xiao Xian planned to take Caesar to the hunt this year. He had been in the hunting team for almost a year, and he had analyzed the risks, advantages and disadvantages. Of course, theory was still theory. In the forest, anything could happen, and no one could be absolutely sure. It was always better to be cautious. Therefore, Xiao Xian planned that if Caesar did not perform well after going out with Caesar, he and Caesar would stop at the first hunting place, so as not to disturb the others' later hunts. In the next few days, Xiao Xian took Caesar to the shaman, and told him his idea. The result was just as Xiao Xian expected. The shaman did not object, but looked forward to it. He even specially allowed Xiao Xian to wait at the first hunting place with Caesar if something went wrong. Since the shaman had spoken, Ta did not say anything. Moreover, he had always remembered Xiao Xian's words last year, "A good dog is the hunter's eyes and ears." He also wanted to see how this wolf, who had been raised in the tribe by Xiao Xian since childhood and was thought to have lost its spirit, would perform. If it did perform well, he would not mind making it more convenient for him. After dealing with the shaman and Ta, Xiao Xian invited Caesar's hunting group to the training place. He let them watch Caesar's training, so that they could know more about Caesar's performance. Originally, they thought that since the shaman, the team leader, and Mai had all agreed, they would not object. Moreover, Xiao Xian was one of the 50 participants in this ceremony, so they did not want to offend him. After watching Caesar's training, some people even said that they would like to raise a wolf cub in the future. After all, there were always conflicts between wolves in the forest, and the loser would kill all the wolf cubs in their den. They had seen this several times, so maybe they could take the opportunity to bring some back. After dealing with the hunting group, Xiao Xian began to prepare for the hunt. The stone tools had been prepared in the winter, so there was no need to polish them anymore. Caesar's training continued every day. Xiao Xian also increased the difficulty of some traps, to see how it reacted. Caesar was very smart. Except for some too complicated ones, it could learn most of the skills Xiao Xian taught to it. Have you ever thought about what will happen to Cha-Cha in the future? Old Ku asked. Cha-Cha is not as honest as Caesar, and maybe it has already avoided us and flown out of the tribe to play a few times. Xiao Xian said. Once, he found some grass clippings on Cha-Cha's fur. That kind of grass did not belong to the tribe, but could only be found in the hunting forest. That time, Xiao Xian taught it a lesson, and it behaved for a while. But now, it probably could not hold back anymore. Now Cha-Cha had grown up a lot. In another half a year, Xiao Xian's arm would not be enough for it to rest on. But according to the shaman, this bird was still a child. It was curious, and could not be controlled. If it wanted to fly, no one could stop it. Now, Cha-Cha had already flown to the surface of the river to play. Sometimes, he would quickly fly over the surface of the water to catch the fish. After tearing them apart, he threw them into the water and watched the piranhas crazily scramble for them. This bird was not easy to tame. Nobody knew how long it would take to tame it until it could be brought out with the hunting group. 20 days later, Gigu's hunting group had not returned yet. But Ta had already confirmed the quota for the upcoming hunting trip, and announced it to everyone from top to bottom. Looking at Caesar, who was following Xiao Xian up the mountain, old Ku suddenly felt quite reluctant. In the blink of an eye, the little wolf cub that Lang Jie had brought back 2 years ago had grown so big. Chapter 113. From the top of the mountain to the moment they left the tribe, Caesar had attracted a lot of attention. When they were walking down the path of glory, the people on both sides of the road had all their attention on Xiao Xian. Why did that wolf also want to go out with the hunting team? Were they crazy? This kind of news was enough to make the people in the tribe talk about it for a long time. When they first went hunting with the hunting team, Lang Jie told Xiao Xian, "You don't need to do anything, just keep up with them." And now, Caesar's first test was also to keep up. When people in the tribe went hunting, they relied on the early training and the guidance of their seniors. But Caesar, after following the hunting team into the forest, showed more of his animal instincts. Relying on this instinct, Caesar was not scared or flinched in the face of the strange environment. Instead, he became more and more excited. Even though he had been locked up in the tribe for 2 years and grew up in the tribe, when he came out and entered the forest, his wild nature was still aroused. He ran like a free wind. If the hunting team did not forbid him to run, he would have roared. At first, Caesar was also curious about the surroundings and sniffed around. But after several warnings from Xiao Xian, he restrained himself. Now, under the influence of his instinct, he followed the hunting team closely and did not drag them down. Sometimes the hunting team directly walked through the trees. Caesar could not climb up the trees, so he stayed below. When he was in the light, he would slow down a little, but when he was in the dark, he would speed up. This was an instinct hidden in Caesar's blood. When he was in the tribe, he did not show it. But when he was in the forest, it was very obvious. Seeing that Caesar was following them all the time and did not cause any trouble, the hunting team was relieved. On the way, Caesar helped the hunting team to lure away a large beast, and easily returned to the team. After climbing over the mountain, they arrived at the first stronghold. They rested for the night and started hunting in the morning. When they went down the mountain, Lang Jie said to Xiao Xian, "Xian, keep an eye on Caesar. There are traps in this area. Be careful not to let it be." Before he finished speaking, Lang Jie saw that Caesar had already walked to the area where the traps were set. He sniffed left and right, seemingly walking around randomly, but he didn't step into any of the traps. The other members of the hunting group also slowed down their steps and looked in that direction. In this area, there were very few large wild beasts and ferocious beasts. Setting up traps here was actually mainly to guard against them. If other large wild beasts or ferocious beasts chased up the mountain, these traps could be used to block them. However, at this moment, Caesar was walking inside, but there were no sounds of traps being activated. Coincidence? That was too much of a coincidence. In the area where Caesar was walking, there were more than a few traps. However, until now, none of them had been activated. Everyone turned to look at Lang Jie blushed, and his eyebrows twitched. Obviously, the situation in front of him was also out of his expectation. I taught it to recognize some traps, so it has a lot of practice in this area. Xiao Xian said calmly. He had already expected that the traps over there wouldn't pose a threat to Caesar. When they were in the tribe, such traps were an essential training task every day. It knows how to avoid traps. Lang Jie swallowed his saliva, and found it hard to accept. If even such a wild beast knew how to avoid traps, then who would set traps for them in the future? Would it look good there? When I come back in the afternoon, I will change the traps over there. Lang Jie said seriously. Indeed, he didn't put much effort into the traps over there. After all, the chances of them being used over there were not high, and they were only used once a year. Every time he came over, he just checked if the traps were broken, and if there were any small wild beasts that accidentally entered. Seeing Lang Jie like this, I felt funny. Well, even wild beasts know how to learn. Lang Jie, you have to work harder. After going down the mountain, Caesar didn't run far. Instead, he followed Xiao Xian closely, and looked around vigilantly. 3 thorn black winds were missing at the foot of the mountain last year, but soon other ferocious beasts would enter this area. Therefore, they still couldn't let down their guard. There's a hole. Ang, who was in charge of scouting ahead, whispered. Hearing Ang's words, the others were all delighted. Where? After confirming that there were no dangerous ferocious beasts nearby, they immediately surrounded Ang. Xiao Xian and Caesar also went over. Ang pushed aside a bunch of knee-high grass, and a small hole was exposed. They're out. Ang said happily. They Ang mentioned was a kind of green rodent. The hunting team called them grass rats, because they looked like a mass of green grass. Their hair was thick, and they were very similar to grass. When they quietly stayed in the grass, it was hard for the hunting team to find them. They would come out during the day and at night. The reason why the hunting team was so excited was that at this time of the year, there was a kind of plant growing on the grass rats, ratwood. Ratwood was a kind of parasitic plant in its seedling stage. Its seeds were very similar to a kind of nut that grass rats like to eat. Every year before winter, grass rats would collect food from all over the mountain, and then store the food in a hole that was several meters deep. They would hide in the hole for the whole winter, eating, drinking, defecating, and sleeping. However, the climate in the basin under the mountain was different from that on the other side of the mountain. There was no snow all year round, and the winter was much warmer than on the other side of the mountain. Even so, the grass rats living in the basin still kept the habit of hibernation. When it was almost winter on the other side of the mountain, the grass rats in the basin began to store food and hide in the hole for the winter. During the whole winter, they spent most of their time sleeping. When they woke up, they would go to the granary to find food, and then go back to sleep after eating. However, the seeds of ratwood that were brought back to the hole of the grass rats began to germinate after being eaten. They broke out of the grass rat's skin and grew into a seedling that was similar to the fur of the grass rats. The energy needed for the growth of ratwood all came from the grass rats, because there was no yang guang in the hole underground. After a whole winter on the other side of the mountain, when the grass rats came out of their holes again, the seedlings of ratwood were almost fully grown. At a suitable time, they would detach from the grass rats and begin to lignify and grow independently. And that time period was within 50 days after the end of winter. Xiao Xian had seen the ratwood in the forest. It was a very huge tree. It was hard to imagine that such a huge tree, from the germination to the seedling stage, was actually a parasite on the grass rats. The ratwood before lignification was very beneficial to people. The children who ate the seedling of rat would be physically strengthened, and the time of awakening would be earlier. Of course, there was also a role of quantity. The more they ate, the more obvious the effect would be. Even if the time of awakening could not be shortened, it could still strengthen the body. Many people in the hunting group had children who had not yet awakened. For them, if they could awaken a year earlier, there would be one more warrior in their family, and they could go out hunting a year earlier, with more food. For the awakened warriors, the seedling of rat would also had a certain detoxification effect, which was better than the medicine they usually used. The people on the mountain might not care about it, but for the people at the foot of the mountain, the seedling of rat wood was indeed very attractive. What was more difficult was that the grass rats were not easy to catch. They were very good at hiding. After they left the cave, no one knew where they would go. There were many entrances to the cave, so even if one guarded one, it could still come out from another one, unless all the other entrances were blocked. Secondly, they had to hurry. If the rat wood had already separated from the grass rat, it would be useless even if they found it. Mike carefully looked at the soil at the entrance of the cave, and calmly said, "Look at the soil, they should have come out for at least half a day." Hearing that it had already been a day, everyone's excitement was cooled down a lot. They had been out for so long, how could they still find it? Can Caesar find it? Ong looked at Caesar, and asked Xiao Xian. "We can have a try," Xiao Xian said. Hearing this, everyone's excitement was rekindled. Can it really find it? How can it find it? It has never seen a grass rat. Well, let Caesar try first. Mai stopped the others from asking more. His two children had already awakened, so they didn't need the help of the rat with seedlings. However, for its detoxification effect, they could try their best to find it. Under Xiao Xian's signal, Caesar went to the entrance of the cave and sniffed. It walked around the cave and seemed to confirm something. It had never seen a grass rat, but there was a smell around the cave, and that was a grass rat. Caesar walked a few steps in a direction, and then looked back at Xiao Xian. "Uncle Mai, it might be over there," Xiao Xian said. "Follow it." Everyone followed behind Caesar. They were not very fast, and sometimes they would warn each other when they encountered ferocious beasts. Caesar, who was tracking, seemed to be very excited. As it sped up, Xiao Xian knew that they were getting closer and closer to the grass rat. Whoosh! Caesar shot out like an arrow, jumped high, jumped over a row of bushes in front of it, and drilled into the grass that was taller than a person. Caesar! Xiao Xian was a little worried. He was afraid that Caesar would be too excited and overlook some dangers hidden in the grass. The bushes were very dense, so it was impossible to see what was hidden inside. Nobody knew what was going on inside. After Caesar rushed in, there was a rapid rustling sound, and then a squeak. After a while, Caesar rushed out of the bushes again. Seeing Caesar, everyone's tense muscles relaxed, but soon, their attention was attracted by the green fur ball in Caesar's mouth. "It's a grass rat. Quick! Xian, see if there's any rat wood on that grass rat." Everyone suddenly became excited. Caesar held the grass rat in his mouth, but he didn't bite it to death, nor did he bite it. Xiao Xian pulled the grass rat out of Caesar's mouth. Without the green fur, the grass rat was about the size of 2 fists, but with the green fur, its size had increased by 3 times. However, when he held it in his hand, Xiao Xian could feel that the grass rat was thin, which was the result of the rat wood parasitism. He didn't see any bald spots. After looking carefully, Xiao Xian's eyes fell on a hair that was slightly thicker than the other green fur. He put the stone knife back on his waist with his other hand and picked up the green hair with his free hand. Seeing a thin brown circle of wood at the root of the green hair, Xiao Xian said with certainty, "It's still there." He handed the grass rat to the people next to him and asked them to cut the seedling of the rat wood. He then looked around. When Caesar went in, he had a bad feeling. Fortunately, Caesar came out quickly. Now, not only did that bad feeling not disappear, but it also became more intense. He glanced at Caesar. The wolf that was excitedly holding the grass rat in its mouth just a moment ago now had the hair on its back standing up. "Uncle Mai," Xiao Xian whispered. Mai, who was watching his team cut the rat wood, saw Xiao Xian's reaction and realized that something was wrong. He made a gesture to the others. Chapter 114. The surroundings suddenly quieted down, and the sound of the grass being blown by the wind could be heard clearly. Because it was best to ensure that the grass rat was alive when cutting the rat wood, they didn't kill it. The grass rat in the hand struggled. The rat wood on its body had been cut off, leaving a brown bald spot in its place. But in half a year, the bald spot would be covered by green hair again. Mai gave the person a look, and the person holding the grass rat bent down slightly, put the grass rat on the ground, and let go. The grass rat that regained its freedom quickly rushed to the tall grass from before. After a slight rustling sound, the surroundings quieted down again, but the atmosphere was somewhat solemn. No one noticed the presence of ferocious beasts in the surroundings, but they could feel a dangerous aura, but they didn't know the specific location. The other party was very good at hiding, or else Mai wouldn't have missed it. The grass rat ran to the grass without hesitation, which meant that it was relatively safe in the grass. Half of the team focused on the opposite direction of the grass, while the others continued to pay attention to the surroundings. Whoosh, it sounded like the wind blowing. But there was only a light breeze around, and the wind wasn't strong enough to cause such a sound. Caesar's throat made a low growl, and at this moment, everyone's nerves were tense. Whoosh, there was another small but rapid sound, as if something was flying quickly. It was close. The surrounding trees weren't dense, and Yang Guang illuminated the forest brightly. A black shadow flashed under Yang Guang. "Over there." Mai rushed over, and at the same time, another black shadow flashed by. In the past, the wild beasts and ferocious beasts in the forest would first attack the weakest in the team, and Xiao Xian would bear the brunt of it. He had experienced it for a whole year last year, and the others' first reaction was to protect Xiao Xian. But this time, the other party charged straight at Caesar. Xiao Xian raised his saber and prepared to step forward to help Caesar block the attack. Unexpectedly, Caesar took the initiative to meet the attack. Within a short distance, Caesar instantly accelerated. His speed was almost pushed to the limit. Like a tightened and loosened bow, he shot out and collided directly with the flying creatures. Bang! Puff! The sound of collision and the sound of flesh being cut rang out. The two landed on the ground and started fighting. It was a creature that looked like a bat with a winged claw. Its wingspan was about 2 meters. It was probably bitten by Caesar, so it couldn't fly up immediately after landing. However, such a creature should only be active at night. Why would it come out in broad daylight? While the two were fighting, Xiao Xian threw a few spear darts at the bat-like creature. It was Caesar's first time encountering such a strong opponent in the wild, and it might not be able to deal with it easily. There were already a few scratches on its body. The stinging of the spear darts distracted the bat. Puff! The sound of flesh being forcefully torn was heard. The smell of blood spread. Caesar tore off one of the bat's wings. The sharp cry almost broke through the eardrums, and the sound waves made people dizzy. But soon, the cry came to an abrupt end because the bat's head was bitten off. Following Caesar's low growl, there were a few more puffs. The dead bat was bitten into a bloody mess. Only then did Caesar stop. "Caesar, come here." Xiao Xian quickly stepped forward, intending to check on Caesar's injuries. However, just as he approached, Caesar, who had been staring at the dead bat with his head lowered, suddenly looked up at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian stopped in his tracks. He felt as if someone had poured a bucket of ice water over his head, making him feel cold. At this moment, Xiao Xian was looking at a pair of eyes filled with ferocious killing intent. The cold gaze seemed to tear everything around it into pieces. It was emotionless. In the wolf's open mouth, 4 of its fangs were stained with blood. Blood dripped down the fur around its mouth. Xiao Xian knew that at this moment, Caesar's ferocious nature, which had been suppressed for 2 years, had awakened. Xiao Xian remembered the pack of wolves in the forest where the hunting ground was located. Caesar was similar to those ancient wolves. Even if he had been a cub, even if he had lived in the tribe for the past 2 years, even if Caesar had gotten along well with the people around him, the ferocious nature was still hidden in his body. It was only waiting for an opportunity to awaken again, like a volcanic eruption. The longer he suppressed it, the more intense the eruption would be. Looking at Caesar, who was crouching beside the bat, Xiao Xian tightened his grip on the stone knife in his hand. If Caesar could not control his ferocious nature and attacked everyone, the hunting group would not spare him. Xiao Xian would stab him himself, and no one else would have to do it. After 2 years of raising him, it was impossible to say that he had no feelings for him. Over the past 2 years, he had grown from a cub that could be held with one hand to a wolf that was taller than himself. Many things had happened in between. From the cave to his own house, Xiao Xian had grown from a thin child to a totem warrior. Caesar had always been by Xiao Xian's side. However, at this moment, both Xiao Xian and Caesar, who had lost his mind, had to make a choice. First, if he attacked the hunting group, Xiao Xian would stab him himself. Second, if he did not want to stay in the hunting group anymore, Xiao Xian would let him go for the sake of the past 2 years. Third, he could control his ferocious nature and come back. Xiao Xian put his free hand behind his back, and made a gesture to the people who were on guard against Caesar, telling them not to move. His eyes were fixed on the wolf that was less than 10 meters away from him. Caesar, what will you choose? In fact, when he decided to bring Caesar out, Xiao Xian had thought about such a situation. Although he did not want to face it, if he stayed in the tribe and did nothing but eat and sleep, he would become everyone's food sooner or later. The shaman had given him a tattoo, but he could take it back. Here, a pet that only enjoyed a comfortable life was not allowed. He needed to prove his value. Blood flowed from the corners of the wolf's mouth, and its eyes were filled with killing intent. It stood there, panting. Every time it breathed, it would carry the thick smell of the blood of this strange bat. However, looking at Xiao Xian, the wolf's murderous look gradually faded away, and his eyes became clear. Wiping the blood from his mouth, Caesar looked up at Xiao Xian, and then walked towards Xiao Xian. Xian. Lang Jie could not help but remind him. They were really frightened by Caesar's appearance. In the tribe, everyone said that Caesar was a wolf that had lost his spirit, and that he was useless. Many people said that Caesar should be eaten as food. However, what was wrong with Caesar just now? Lost his spirit? Bullshit. That murderous look made Lang Jie shiver, and he almost threw the spear in his hand at him. Useless? He even tore off the wings of that monster just now. How could he be called useless? Sure enough, a beast was still a beast. His ferocity was still there. Xiao Xian waved his hand behind his back again, telling Lang Jie and the others not to make a move for now. Caesar lifted his foot and slowly walked towards Xiao Xian. His wolf claws were still stained with blood. Every step he took, he left a bloody footprint. His fur was also stained with blood when he tore off his wings, making him look even more ferocious. 8 meters. 5 meters. 3 meters, Xiao Xian looked at the wolf that was getting closer and closer. His eyes were calm, but his heart was beating faster. He stretched out the hand behind his back, but the other hand was still holding the stone knife, ready to deal with any changes. Caesar panted as he slowly walked in front of Xiao Xian. He looked at Xiao Xian, then lowered his head, as if he knew that he had done something wrong. He lowered his ears and rubbed his head against Xiao Xian's outstretched palm. The moment his palm touched the wolf's head, Xiao Xian let out a long breath and put down his hand that was holding the stone knife. As usual, Xiao Xian would rub Caesar's head after completing the task successfully. Well done. Caesar's head swayed along Xiao Xian's hand. He even stuck out his tongue and licked Xiao Xian's hand, getting some bat blood on Xiao Xian's hand. Xian. Are you okay now? Lang Jie stuttered. Caesar looked the same as usual, but after what happened just now, he didn't dare to approach him. He didn't put down the spear in his hand. I'm okay now. Xiao Xian knew that the others in the hunting group would have to guard against Caesar for a while, but he knew that it would get better gradually. After this incident, Caesar's ferocity came back. But it was good that he could control himself. Pulling Caesar aside, Xiao Xian checked the claw marks on his body. He took out some powder that he made to treat external injuries and sprinkled it on the wounds. He wanted to see if it would work. After Xiao Xian pulled Caesar aside, Lang Jie and the others walked over to check the dead bat. The other one had been killed by Mai. That one was bigger than the one Caesar killed, with longer and sharper claws. If Caesar had fought against that one, he would have been badly injured. Why did these things come out in the daytime? Another older warrior in the hunting group asked. Is it the same as last year's thorn black wind? It also came out in the daytime. Someone asked. No, it's not the same. Mai shook his head. The thorn black wind came out to take revenge on us. But, why did these things come out? I've been hunting for so many years, and I've only seen them a few times. The group fell into silence. They were not afraid of these creatures. In fact, these two were not very powerful in the forest. But, they were afraid that there might be some trouble behind them. Every abnormal situation in the forest could be a sign of something big. While they were in silence, they suddenly heard a few whistles. All the members of the hunting group were here, but no one blew the whistle. Obviously, the whistles were not from their own group, but from other groups. You guys stay here. We'll go and have a look. Mai led a few people and rushed towards the direction where the whistles came from. After a while, Mai and the others came with 5 people. The 5 of them all had different degrees of injuries. They were from a hunting group that was close to Xiao Xian's hunting route. Last year, when Xiao Xian and Mao were chased away by the thorn black wind, Mai asked them for help. Seeing the bat that was killed by Mai on the ground, the leading man's face changed. You guys met it? Not just one, we met 2. Lang Jie and the others stepped aside, showing the one that was killed by Caesar. So, you guys met it too? Mai looked at the man who came over. The man sighed. Yeah, I don't know why, these things should come out at night, but they run around during the day. Our group has been attacked many times. Oh right, we're here to ask you for a favor. While speaking, the man looked at Xiao Xian and Caesar, who was lying beside Xiao Xian. I heard that your wolf can find things by smell. Mai did not answer, but looked at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian nodded, and answered, yes. It caught a grass rat just now. Lang Jie said. Although they were still on guard against Caesar, they could not help showing off to the other hunting groups. When they left the tribe, the other hunting groups often mocked them. We want to borrow it. The man did not care about Lang Ga's tone, and said. What for? Mai asked. Looking for someone. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.